So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, what city are you in right now? And what time is it? I want to imagine the exact setting as you listen to this. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. Take a deep breath and let your shoulders relax. Tonight, we embark on a journey back to the 14th century, a time when famine, war, and plague combined in a perfect storm that reshaped Europe forever. From fields ravaged by hunger to the clash of swords on battlefields and the silent menace of a microscopic killer, this is the story of an apocalypse and the fragile hope that emerged from its ashes. As we weave through each chapter, you'll hear the voices of peasants and princes, soldiers and survivors, doctors and dreamers. Their struggles and triumphs will become our guideposts in this dark, terrifying, and surprisingly resilient era. So, settle in, let your imagination roam, and prepare to witness 14th century apocalypse, famine, war, and plague, the end and beginning of an era. The early morning mist still clung to the furrows as Ingrid drew her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Before her lay the once fertile stretch of barley, now yellowed and brittle. She sank to her knees in the soft earth and ran her fingers across a dying stalk. "It's no use," she whispered to her husband Eric, who stood nearby with arms folded. His broad shoulders slumped. For months the rains had failed, and breadcrumbs were all their children would taste this winter. Ingrid pressed her lips together and rose. "We must go to the village, beg for alms." She walked toward the half-collapsed barn, where their 3 young children huddled. Little Sonia clutched a ragged doll, her wide eyes reflecting a mixture of fear and curiosity. Beside her, Magnus, barefoot despite the chill, and their toddler brother Lars, sootily bumbled after his sister. Eric laid a heavy hand on Ingrid's shoulder. "I will talk with the steward at dawn. Perhaps he'll spare us a sack of grain." He met Ingrid's worried gaze. "We do what we must." Across the horizon, a hawk circled lazily above the parched fields. Birds of prey still gathered for what little remained. Ingrid drew Sonia close, brushing a smudge of dirt from her cheek. "We are alive," she murmured, "and as long as we breathe, hope survives." Ahead, the grey stone of the village church rose like a promise. Soon, they would join the throng at the doorway, hearts braced for mercy or denial. Ingrid took a steadying breath, her thoughts on prayers whispered in candlelit chapels. "Come, children," she said softly. We walked together. Hand in hand, they stepped forward, each footfall a testament to endurance in a world on the brink of collapse. At the edge of the cobblestone square, the village grain store stood half open, sacks piled high within. A slender clerk, his ink-stained tunic tight at the waist, held the ledger against his chest as voices rose around him. "You promised 2 bushels last week," cried Thomas, a gaunt farmer whose fields had also failed. He thrust a meaty fist into the air. "My children go hungry." "Peace, Thomas," interceded Elder Margaret, her silver hair bound beneath a simple linen coif. "We all suffer this year." She placed a gentle hand on the farmer's shoulder. Thomas glared but fell silent. The clerk, Joran, adjusted his quill behind his ear. The steward ordered strict rationing. Each family may claim 1.5 bushels, no more. A murmur rippled through the small crowd. Wives held their children close. Men frowned against the chill. From the back stepped Anna, the baker's wife, cheeks flushed with indignation. "1/2 bushel will not bake enough bread for Sunday's Sabbath." Joran's voice quavered. I have no discretion. This ledger records what the steward decrees." He tapped the page with a trembling finger. Elder Margaret raised a quiet voice. "Let us not descend into chaos. We will petition the steward together at noon. Perhaps he will hear our plight." Thomas straightened, shoulders heavy with pride and fear. He nodded slowly. Very well. We wait. The farmer and the baker's wife exchanged exhausted looks, then turned away. Joran exhaled, a relieved breath, closing the ledger with care. Elder Margaret caught his eye and offered a small, reassuring nod. Around them, villagers drifted off to gather belongings, hearts laden with uncertainty, but buoyed by the promise of unity. Dappled sunlight filtered through the arched windows of the stone abbey as Brother Aelric knelt before the rough-hewn altar, murmuring a prayer for the village's suffering. He rose and turned, beckoning two ragged figures forward. The first, a thin woman with sunken cheeks, clutched the hem of her threadbare gown. Beside her stood a gaunt youth whose eyes flickered between hope and shame. "Gentle, peace be with you," Aelric said gently, placing a loaf of dark, coarse bread and a pail of thin gruel in their trembling hands. "May this sustain you until the fields yield again." Outside in the cloistered courtyard, Sister Helena directed the novices as they ladled soup into bowls. A small line had formed. Farmers with empty baskets, children shivering without coats, and an old man leaning heavily on his staff. Helena called each by name, offering a warm smile and a moment of solace. "God sees your need," she whispered, patting the old man's shoulder. A low murmur of gratitude rose among the crowd. One mother pressed the bowl to her breast before turning to find a bench in the shade. Nearby, the steward's messenger arrived on horseback, bearing a sealed missive. Brother Aelric excused himself and broke the seal. The steward approved additional shipments from the monastery's southern grange. Relief spread through Aelric's features. At least for now, more families would be fed. As twilight approached, lanterns were lit along the cloister's walk, and the last of the villagers departed with provisions carefully balanced in arms. The abbey's ancient stones seemed to breathe with compassion, and the distant toll of the chapel bell offered a soft benediction. Brother Aelric and Sister Helena exchanged tired but hopeful glances. In this harsh season, faith remained their greatest harvest. On the winding road outside the village, Marcus the merchant guided his creaking cart, laden with cloth and spices. Though his usual cheer was dampened by grim news, he dismounted at the roadside inn, where thick smoke curled from the chimney. Inside, the innkeeper Polina wiped her hands on a stained apron. "Marcus!" she greeted, voice low. "I hear the stewards elsewhere have closed their granaries." He nodded, concern etched in the lines around his eyes. "My sister's family in Highborough had only 1 sack of wheat left this morning. They fear it won't last a fortnight." At a corner table, a travelling scholar unrolled a weathered parchment. "Letters from the south say the barley crop failed completely," she said, voice hushed but urgent. "I've copied this report for the mayor." She slid the parchment across. Marcus caught a glimpse of figures marking harvest yields. Abysmal. Outside, patrons gathered in clusters. A blacksmith paused at the door, wiping sweat and soot from his brow. "If roads close for want of feed for horses, the mail stops," he muttered. "We'll have no word of relief." Polina poured a rough ale. "Rumours breed faster than mice," she said with a wry grin. "Soon we'll be trading knives for a loaf." Marcus lifted his mug in a solemn toast. "To truth-finding ears and kindness-finding hearts," he offered. As dusk fell, the inn's lantern glow spilled onto the road, where travellers whispered parting words. Marcus climbed back onto his cart, the scholar's parchment secured in his satchel. With each rattle of the wheel, the rumours of famine carried farther, stoking both dread and resolve in every village they touched. The morning sun had barely climbed above the rooftops when the townspeople converged on the stone-paved square. Murmur grew to a roar as broken families, clutching empty bowls, faced the locked doors of the communal bakehouse. Thomas, the gaunt farmer from Scene 2, led the charge, pounding his fist against the heavy oak door. "Open the ovens!" he bellowed. "We starve!" Behind him, women wailed for their children. An elderly baker, clutching flour-streaked hands, trembled as his cries joined the tumult. Town guards, in mismatched armour, formed a line, halberds lowered but ready. Captain Rowan stepped forward, cape flapping. "By order of the steward, no one enters until rationing is complete," he declared. The crowd surged. A stray loaf, a half-baked remnant, flew from a cart, landing at Rowan's feet. He kicked it aside, and the mob pressed closer. Thomas raised a makeshift club, but a soft voice echoed through the hubbub. "Please," Elder Margaret called, striding between mob and bakehouse. She held up a petition, stained and creased. "We present our grievances here, not ruin these ovens. Let us speak. Reason may yet save our bread." A hush fell as Thomas lowered his club. He snatched the petition and waved it aloft. "Read it!" he demanded. Rowan accepted it, unrolling the list of signatures. Farmers, mothers, bakers. He glanced at his guards, then out at the pleading faces. Slowly, he nodded. "We will escort a delegation to the steward," he announced. Relief rippled through the square, angry but tempered by hope. As the crowd parted, Margaret caught Thomas's eye and offered a gentle smile. In that moment, rage gave way to unity, and the riot became a march toward justice for those who hungered most. High atop the battlements of Greystone Keep, Lord Alaric surveyed his parched holdings with heavy heart. Below, fields once golden with barley lay cracked and barren, the packed soil etched like a dry riverbed. His steward, Sir Emond, stood at his elbow, scroll in hand. "My lord, starving tenants beg for mercy. Some cannot pay their dues." Alaric closed his eyes against the midday glare, recalling the day his father had taught him stewardship meant both justice and compassion. He turned to Emond. "Thoughtful. We drafted leases promising harvest rent, yet this season has broken every promise." His voice was low but firm. In the courtyard, a bailiff confronted a kneeling peasant, demanding coin. Alaric's jaw tightened. He strode past Emond and descended the stone steps, banners fluttering overhead. Servants and guards parted, watching with uneasy eyes. At the base of the keep, the bailiff bowed. "My lord, the mortgage is due and—" Alaric held up a hand. He unrolled the steward's scroll and, with deliberate strokes of midnight blue ink, struck out dues for every tenant who could not pay. A murmur rippled through the gathered crowd. "By my word," Alaric declared, voice carrying, "no man shall lose his home for this year's failures. Gather what grain remains and share it until the fields yield again." Relief washed over the peasant families. Children tugged at trembling parents. A single tear traced Lady Celeste's cheek as she watched the scene from a window above, her own hands trembling. Emond approached, brow furrowed. Concerned. "My lord, your generosity may bankrupt the keep itself." Alaric turned to him, eyes steady, firmly. "Better we share ruin together than prosper over suffering. Faith demands we care for those who feed us." As cheers rose, a hawk wheeled overhead, a silent witness to a decision born of mercy and honour. A beacon of hope against the ravaged landscape. The clang of hammer on anvil fell silent as dusk approached Ashwood village. Victor, the blacksmith, stared at his cold forge, its coals reduced to lifeless grey. Sweat coated his brow, despite the chill, and his leather apron bore scorch marks now unsigned by flame. His apprentice, Roland, waited with unused tongs. "Father," Roland ventured. "Should we try to rekindle the fire?" Victor shook his head. No iron to shape, no horses to shoe, no ploughs to mend. He ran a rough hand through his soot-dark hair. "Without grain for bread, no one has coin for nails." Roland clasped Victor's arm. "We could offer free repairs. Maybe the steward will allow it." A soft footstep drew their attention. Marta, the village healer, entered carrying a clay jar of salve. "Victor, your tools could help me patch wounds in the famine's wake. Mothers and sick folk need bandages fastened." Victor's gaze softened. He retrieved a battered horseshoe and hammered it flat on the anvil, sending sparks dancing in the lantern light. "Then let us work for what matters." Roland hastened to gather metal scraps while Marta laid out cloth and herbs on an oak table. Soon, the rhythmic ring resumed, though the purpose had shifted from profit to service. Villagers peered in, faces lit by the forge's glow, gratitude mingled with exhaustion. By nightfall, the forge's hearth burned anew. Victor offered the first handhold of metal to a shivering child, whose mother dabbed at a fevered brow. Marta smiled warmly, her hands steady. Victor paused and inhaled the glossy scent of heated steel and healing balm. "In darkest times," he murmured, "we forge our greatest strengths." Outside, the sound of hammering echoed across silent fields, a testament to resilience and quiet solidarity. Sunbeams slanted through the stained-glass windows of St. Agnes Church, scattering coloured patterns across the stone floor. Father Matthias stood at the pulpit, his simple woolen robe swaying as he spoke. The pews were packed. Farmers, weavers, widows, and children gathered in hush. "Brothers and sisters," he intoned, voice rich and calm, "our land has yielded little this season, but God's mercy endures beyond any harvest." He paused, eyes meeting those of Elder Margaret near the front. "We hunger not only for bread, but for faith renewed." A farmer named Gerard shifted, his sunburned face drawn. "Father, how do we serve Providence when bellies growl?" Father Matthias inclined his head. "By sharing what little remains, comforting the weak, and trusting that charity begets grace." He lifted a gilded chalice. "Just as Christ multiplied loaves for the multitudes, so can small acts of love feed countless souls." Soft tears glistened on cheeks. A weeping widow, clutching a faded shawl, pressed a hand to her heart. Behind her, two parishioners exchanged glances, determination replacing despair. Following the sermon, congregants formed lines to leave coins, bread crusts, and jars of mead at the foot of the altar. Young children placed their toy horses among the offerings. Someone lit a candle for each petition, and flickering flames filled the sanctuary with gentle light. As the final hymn waned, the church doors opened to a hush of reverent intent. Outside, Margaret guided Gerard and others to organize a communal soup kitchen beneath the porch. The echo of footsteps on stone carried a promise. Providence moves most powerfully through human hands. In a cramped, thatch-roofed hovel on the outskirts of town, Widow Isolde slipped through the low doorway, voice hushed. The interior was dim. A single tallow candle flickered on a crooked table. Across from her sat Thomas, the gaunt farmer, and Anna, the baker's wife, whose apron bore flour stains despite the lean months. Isolde placed a small wooden bowl on the table. From inside her cloak she withdrew 2 morsels of black bread and a few dried peas, her entire winter's reserve. Thomas's eyes widened. He caught Anna's startled gaze. "Where did you—" Anna began, but Isolde cut her off gently. "I stole these from my late husband's meal pail. I'd rather face the steward's wrath than watch my neighbours starve." They moved close around the table, each cupping the bread as if it were a precious gem. The candlelight carved deep shadows on their hollow cheeks. Each bite was taken slowly, reverently, hearts pounding with fear and gratitude. Thomas swallowed. "May God forgive me for accepting." He looked at Isolde with fierce respect. Anna dabbed her eyes with a corner of her sleeve. "It is not thievery, but salvation," Isolde replied. "We are bound by love, not by coin." Outside, a patrol neared, guards checking on empty fields. Isolde extinguished a candle and led her friends into a dark corner. The wooden door creaked as the guards passed by unaware. In silence, they held hands, the warmth of companionship staving off the cold. Though only a few scraps of bread passed between them, the shared morsel fortified more than their bodies. It renewed their spirits with sacrificial solidarity. Moonlight spilled over the drought-cracked fields as young life stood sentinel at the edge of the village. His wooden spear felt heavy in his numb fingers. Beside him, old Gunnar, once a proud warrior, hunched against the chill, lantern at his feet. Leif's breath formed clouds in the cool air. "Do you think thieves will come for what little grain remains?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. Gunnar's pale eyes glinted. He nodded slowly. "In desperation, a man takes any path." Yet we guard what hope is left. He lifted the lantern high, its weak glow illuminating rows of barren earth. Across the field, a dark shape moved, a lone figure creeping toward the grain storehouse. Life pointed, heart racing. Gunnar raised his own spear. "Stand firm!" The shape halted. A young woman, ragged cloak drawn tight, stared back with wide, frightened eyes. Life's grip loosened. He hesitated. Gunnar strode forward and addressed her. "Who goes there?" he demanded. She lowered her hood, revealing tear-streaked cheeks. "I am Inga. My brothers are ill. I meant only to fetch a single sack, to feed them one last meal," she pleaded. Life glanced at Gunnar. The old man's stern gaze softened. He turned back to Inga. "Return to the village. Tomorrow we share what we can, but not a single grain more." Inga bowed deeply, relief flooding her features. As she slipped away, Life. Gunnar lowered the lantern. Together they resumed their watch under the silent moon, guarding not just stores of grain, but the fragile bonds of mercy that held their community together. The dawn horn echoed against the stone walls of Blackwood Keep, rousing the garrison with a sonorous blast. Sir Gareth Duval stood atop the rampart in polished gambeson and mail coif, his gauntleted hands shading his eyes as he surveyed the assembled men-at-arms. Below, rows of pikemen, archers and levy foot soldiers waited in grim formation, breath misting in the crisp morning air. A herald in blue and silver tabard climbed the wooden dais and unfurled a scroll. "By order of Lord Blackwood, all able-bodied fighting men shall muster and swear fealty before march," he proclaimed. Murmurs rippled through the ranks. Young squires tightened their greaves. Veterans checked spearheads. Young Tristan, Sir Gareth's eager squire, approached with a leather-bound shield slung over his shoulder. "Sir," he queried, voice nervous but determined, "will we join the king's banner at the border?" Gareth placed a reassuring hand on Tristan's shoulder. "Soon enough. First, we prove our mettle here." He motioned toward the cavernous gate. "Ensure the crossbowmen and pikemen line the outer yard. We begin inspection at first light." Tristan nodded and hustled off. Across the bailey, a small knot of militia, farmers in padded jackets and peasants in simple hose, shifted uncertainly. Lady Merrin, the keep's castellan, stepped down to address them. "Your service saves our homes. Do not falter." Her steady gaze and soft words straightened shoulders and raised chins. Sir Gareth blew a second horn, steel ringing in its brazen curves. Archers knocked bolts. Pikemen braced their fellow spears in disciplined ranks. The air crackled with tension and purpose, a community bound by blood and oath, preparing to defend kin and keep. Sunlight glinted off steel as combatants clashed in the keep's training yard. Sir Gareth moved among them, fine sword in hand, correcting guards and guiding thrusts. Beside him, Tristan practiced parries under his mentor's watchful eye. Advising, "Not so rigid, lad," Gareth advised, gently redirecting Tristan's blade. "Flow with your opponent. A knight's strength lies in wit, not simply muscle." Tristan nodded, adjusting his stance, and their swords sang in renewed sparring. Nearby, a line of archers drew bows in unison, arrows thudding into straw targets. Master Bowman Aldwyn, shouting, barked commands. "Aim low, loose your draw, then raise your sight for greater distance." Sweat dampened Aldwyn's tunic as he moved along the line, offering tips. A youth named Ewan adjusted his finger placement, releasing an arrow that struck dead center. Aldwyn smiled, exhale relief. At the far end, pikemen drilled under Captain Rowena's strict gaze. Wooden shafts boomed as they aligned in phalanx, stepping forward in perfect synchronization. Rowena raised her halberd. Firmly. "Keep shoulders square. The enemy falters if we stand firm." From the gallery, Lady Merrin and Sir Gareth's lady wife exchanged quiet conversation. "They train hard," Merrin observed, "yet I see fear in their eyes." Calmly, "Courage is born from discipline," Lady Duval responded. "Let them learn here so they face no greater trial when steel meets steel." As a trumpet call echoed through the keep, the yard fell silent. Spears lowered and swords sheathed. Each man and woman breathed deeply, united by the shared rigors of training. readying themselves for the uncertainty of war beyond these walls. The great hall glowed with torchlight as Lady Amara curated her farewell. She stood in silk surcoat of deep crimson, golden filigree at her sleeves, her dark hair bound beneath a lace veil. Her husband, Sir Gareth, in full plate, knelt before her. "Emotional Amara," he murmured, voice thick with emotion. "Promise you're right when safe." He placed a sealed parchment into her hand. Amara offered a gentle smile, despite tears brimming. Softly, "My heart remains with you, even across leagues of land. I shall send word by trusted messenger." She extracted a small locket from beneath her surcoat. Inside, a miniature of their young son, Tristan. "Carry this close." Tristan, recently knighted, hovered nearby, an oversized male, awkward but determined. He hugged his mother fiercely. "I won't forget your stories," he whispered. Lady Merrin approached, bearing a delicate wooden chest. "Gentle supplies for the journey, parchments, coins, and my own cloak, should winter threaten." She curtsied, eyes soft. Amara embraced Merrin. "Sincere, your loyalty is my greatest comfort." A trumpeter sounded in the courtyard. Soldiers gathered at the great doors, forming an arch of spears. Sir Gareth rose, sweeping his helm from his brow. He bowed low. Amara ascended the dais to address the assembly. Clear voice. "I go to my family's lands near the border to negotiate peace for our realm." Her voice rang clear. "Know that I carry your courage in every step." Smoke from torches curled upward as Amara passed beneath the arch of spears, her train swaying gracefully. Tristan reached for his father's hand, eyes wide. Gareth raised him onto his shoulders, calling after her. Loudly, "Return to us safely!" Outside, beyond the keep gates, her horse waited, saddled and ready. As she rode into moonlit mist, her silhouette blended duty with devotion, every hoofbeat echoing the fragile hope she carried. The main gate of Blackwood Keep creaked open to reveal a winding dirt road, flanked by fir trees. Sir Gareth rode at the head of the column, his banner, black stag on silver, fluttering above cavalry and infantry alike. The air smelled of pine and anticipation. Behind him, Tristan led a group of squires carrying water skins and spare helm. He scanned the line of men-at-arms, old Lancer Rolf adjusting his reins, Archer Ewan fletching new arrows, Captain Rowena checking pike tips. The march had begun. Passing through hamlets, villagers knelt in prayer, while mothers held children aloft. A frail shepherd offered Gareth a lamb, a gesture of solidarity. Gareth nodded gratefully but shook his head, thoughtful. "Keep your flock. We carry their spirit with us." As the road climbed toward rocky hills, the column slowed. Scouts on dappled ponies dashed ahead, returning to report distant banners on the ridge. Sir Gareth halted the march, determined. "Rest arms here. We approach the contested border at first light." Around the flickering campfires, tents sprouted like mushrooms in the dusk. Trumpeter Alden sounded the call for evening watch. Soldiers staked tents, while cooks hauled kettles of broth. In one circle, an elderly minstrel strummed a lute, his ballad weaving tales of past glories. Tristan approached his father, thoughtful. "Do you think the rumour's true, that the border lords seek open war?" Gareth set a hand on Tristan's shoulder under the firelight. Serious. "War comes on swift wings. But we serve to protect home and hearth, not to conquer." He paused, eyes distant. Firmly. "Hold fast to that truth." As moonlight washed the camp, the knights and kin settled for the night, swords and shields at their sides, hearts steeled for the trials to come. Under a pall of dawn mist, the slender path through whispering woods lay quiet. Captain Rowena signaled the column to slow. Spears lowered, scouts in leather jerkin melted into the underbrush, keen eyes scanning the gloom. Tristan rode alongside Master Bowman Aldwin. "All too silent," Tristan murmured, gripping his reins. Aldwin nodded, bow at the ready. Suddenly, shrieks, a shrill war horn split the air. From behind twisted oaks, cloaked figures emerged. bandits or raiders, their faces painted and blades drawn. Rowan raised her halberd. Commanding, "Shield wall!" she commanded. The pikemen formed tight ranks, steel points flashing. Archers knocked arrows in unison as bowstrings whispered taut. Sir Gareth drew his sword and joined the front line, mail clinking with each deliberate step. Arrows arced through the mist, finding targets among the assailants' lighter garb. A shriek of surprise answered the volley, and the woods erupted in clang and cry. Tristan steeled himself and charged, adrenaline steadying his heart. Amidst fallen leaves and churned earth, Gareth parried a savage slash, then drove his blade home, only to catch another strike. Nearby, Rowena's halberd crashed through a raider's shield, sending sparks flying. Aldwyn loosed arrow after arrow, each finding purchase. As the clash peaked, a horn from the rear signaled reinforcements. The levy foot soldiers emerged, brandishing poles and farming tools. Their arrival turned the tide. The attackers wavered, then broke into retreat, vanishing like ghosts into the forest's depths. Gareth lowered his sword and surveyed his weary kin. Tristan dismounted, offering water to fallen pikemen. Rowena counted wounded. Aldwyn checked arrows. The column bore losses but stood unbroken, a testament to unity in peril. Sir Gareth sheathed his sword, determined. We march on, to meet our true foe with stronger bonds and sharper resolve. Dusk settled over the makeshift camp, where canvas tents flapped in the chill breeze. A watchtower's lantern swung on its rope, casting jittery light across hastily dug earthworks. Captain Rowena paced the rampart while Dr. Elowen, the camp physician, moved between the wounded. Another shell just past the cook fires. Rowena reported to Sir Gareth, who stood behind her in full helm. His visor was raised, revealing a furrowed brow. Sighs. Their siege engines have greater range than we feared. Below, half-buried archers fired sporadic volleys at distant silhouettes. Each shot echoed like a dying crow. Tristan, wrapped in a borrowed cloak, assisted Dr. Elowen in tending a grievous spear wound on a pikeman named Jaron. "Hold steady," Elowen murmured, her gloved hands gentle yet firm. Tristan offered a flask of water. From the cook tent, Roland the squire emerged with bowls of gruel. "They've cut off foraging parties," he warned. "Supplies won't last the week." Gareth surveyed the shrinking fire pits. "We must hold until relief arrives." He turned to Rowena. "Send word to the lieutenant on the east trench. Tell him to reinforce the palisade before nightfall." Rowena saluted and rode off into flickering torchlight. Meanwhile, Elowen and Tristan finished splinting Jaron's leg. The pikeman winced, but managed a weak smile. "Thank you," he rasped. Overhead, a thunderous crack heralded another bombardment. Timber beams splintered against the protective wall. Men ducked and prayed as dirt rained down. Sir Gareth gripped his sword's pommel, voice low. "We endure. Courage will be our bulwark." As lanterns bobbed on the ramparts and prayers floated from the chapel tent, the encampment braced itself against the coming storm. A siege of strength, resolve, and unbreakable solidarity. The sun climbed overhead as workers hustled around a vast wooden frame in the assembly yard. Master Engineer Aldrich stood on a scaffold, blueprint scroll clutched in one hand, calling directions in his gravelly voice. "Pivot the axle 2 inches north, or the trebuchet's swing will misalign." Below, a group of labourers, peasants in coarse tunics and leather dernies, struggled to lift a hefty timber beam. Among them, Jocelyn, a burly smith's apprentice, braced her legs and heaved. "Ugh! This will crush their walls," she muttered, sweat dripping onto rough-hewn wood. Near a pile of twisted iron fittings, the castle blacksmith hammered a giant hook, sparks flying. Beside him, Aldrich's foreman, Richard, checked each component against the engineer's drawings. "The slinkord must bear 300 pounds, he warned, examining braided hemp rope for frays. Sir Gareth and Captain Rowena strode through the din. "How soon can it fire?" Gareth asked, raising voice rising above the clamour. Aldrich lowered his gaze from the scaffold. "By nightfall, we'll have one fully functional, and 2 more by dawn." He spat gravel from his mouth. "Time is precious." Rowena nodded approvingly. "Once we breach their outer wall, the relief column can enter the courtyard." As hammers rang and saws rasped against oak, Tristan approached Jocelyn, offering a flask. She took a long draught, then beckoned him to help adjust the winch mechanism. Together, they inserted the final axle bolt. At midday, Aldrich climbed down and tested the tension. He signaled the capstone delivery. A massive granite block rolled on greased logs into place. When the arm lowered under counterweight, a cheer erupted among the crew. Sir Gareth raised his helm's visor and announced, "Let's bring dawn and victory sooner than they expect." A crimson banner flew from the enemy's gate as the herald's trumpet announced the parley. Sir Gareth, Sir Roland and Lady Rowena crossed the drawbridge on a white flag of truce, entering the outer bailey where rival soldiers stood at attention. Opposite them stood Envoy Marcellus, dressed in olive brocade, flanked by 2 grim-faced captains. He inclined his head minutely. "You trespass under banner of peace," he intoned. Sir Gareth offered a curt bow. "We seek terms to spare our people more bloodshed." He gestured toward Lady Rowena. Lady Rowena pardoned Envoy. The sloshing moat water reflected nervous tension. Sir Roland, Sir Gareth's squire, held a sealed dossier. He stepped forward, presenting it. Marcellus broke the wax with deft fingers, reading the document. Lady Rowena addressed the captains. "Firm. We propose to lift siege if you allow safe passage for relief wagons and agree to cease raids beyond this border." Her tone was firm, but calm. One captain spat onto cobblestones. "Spits. Your supply wagons will be seized, your people enslaved." He drew his sword hilt in defiance. Sir Roland swallowed, hand trembling on the dossier. Sir Gareth's voice rang out, loudly, "Then for every wagon taken, we renew this at greater force. Your lord risks ruin." Marcellus raised his palm, calmly. "We will consider these terms. Return tomorrow by noon for answer." He signalled his captains to step away. The truce banner lowered, and Sir Gareth and Rowena retreated to their lines. Behind them, pikemen reformed, while archers knocked arrows. Sir Roland, shh, gaze fixed on the enemy keep. As the drawbridge lifted behind them, Lady Rowena placed a steadying hand on Roland's shoulder. "Diplomacy is war by other means," she murmured. "We have sown the seeds. Now we await harvest." The dawn mist retreated to reveal a churned landscape, scorched earth, splintered stakes, and abandoned weapons. Chaplain Anselm moved through the carnage, clutching a small cross and a vial of holy water. He approached a fallen knight, Sir Lucan, who lay bloodied but conscious. Softly, "Peace be with you," Anselm said, kneeling. Lucan's visor was dented, his arm dripped crimson. The chaplain anointed the wound. Nearby, a survivor, peasant-turned-soldier Brant, picked up his shattered pike and leaned on the chaplain's shoulder. "It is over," he said, voice thick with grief. Anselm steadied him. "Give thanks you live." Many did not. Across the field, a small group of prisoners in ragged tunics were escorted under guard. Among them was a teenage raider, eyes downcast, shaking. Captain Rowena watched from a fallen oak stump, expression grim. She strode over and knelt. Quietly, "You fought for your lord because you believed no other path," she said. The youth's lip trembled. "I know. Despair drives men to darkness, yet mercy redeems." She offered water. He accepted hesitantly. On the horizon, vultures circled above. The chaplain called for volunteers to gather bodies. Tristan and Roland joined, lifting the fallen with reverence. Each carried a prayer on his lips, names murmured to give rest to warriors and raiders alike. Sir Gareth stood over the field's edge, cloak trailing in the cool breeze. He surveyed the cost in silence, then touched his sword pommel. May this sacrifice forge a future unchained by war. As the sun climbed, its rays illuminated the weary figures, the chaplain, the survivor, the prisoner, each embodying the fragile hope that even in devastation, compassion and repentance endure. Weeks later, the column retraced its path under a grey sky. Once vibrant forests appeared scorched and hollowed by war. Sir Gareth led the weary knights, their armour scuffed and dented. Tristan walked beside him, sword sheathed, boots muddied. At the road's edge, half-ruined cottages bore signs of flight, their doors ajar, belongings scattered. A lone farmer, shoulders drooped, approached Gareth. "My family fled south. No hearth remains." Gareth dismounted and removed his helm. "We share what we can." He reached into his satchel and produced a small sack of grain. He handed it over. The farmer's eyes pooled with tears. Nearby, Roland knelt to tie a villager's sandal. Captain Rowena surveyed the scene from horseback, eyes distant. Our victory rings hollow amid such ruin. Tristan touched his father's arm. "Father, will they rebuild?" Gareth looked down the road, where ragged survivors emerged from the woods, women carrying bundles, children clinging to swollen-faced mothers. "They have no choice but to try," he said. "Hope is the only seed that grows in broken ground." They continued until the keep's silhouette rose on the horizon. As they passed through the gates, Lady Merrin and Dr. Elowen awaited, arms open. The soldiers' spirits lifted with the first sight of home. Inside the courtyard, laughter and tears mingled as families reunited. Sir Gareth embraced Rowena. Tristan spotted his mother stepping from the great hall, relief flooding her features. Amid the battered banners and dented armour, the column dismounted, wounded but unbroken. From hardship had sprung unity, from despair, compassion. Though the land bore deep scars, its people would rebuild together, fueled by the resilience forged in war's crucible. In the pre-dawn haze of the bustling harbour town of Marshwell, Ratcliffe, the shipwright, wiped salt from his beard as he listened to two disembarked sailors into their sleeves. Their pale faces and feverish eyes spoke of more than sea spray. Beneath the creaking masts, a coastal friar named Brother Simeon hurried toward the quay, clutching a small vial of blessed water. He paused before the sailors. "They came from Marseille," one sailor gasped, "a sickness that blackens the flesh." Simeon placed a hand on the rail and inhaled the damp breeze. "God save us," he murmured, slipping the vial into his robes. He beckoned the ship's captain, Ulrich, who emerged from below decks. Ulrich bowed his head. "Our cargo holds grain and cloth, but we have more darkness." Word spread among the dockhands. A merchant collapsed, his skin mottled. Women in cloaks scattered spices and herbs on the planking in a futile warding ritual. Ratcliffe exchanged a glance with the harbour master, who rang an alarm bell. Lanterns were lit, and a cordon formed. Quarantine orders in trembling script nailed to the warehouse door. As dawn glinted on the river, a caravan of monks arrived, carrying liturgical scrolls and incense. Brother Simeon led them in prayer, voices echoing over the water. Yet in every breath, the hint of panic grew. A plague had arrived with the tide. The whitewashed walls of St. Ursula's infirmary gleamed beneath a sickly torchlight, as Matilda, the young novice, guided a stretcher bearing Judith, a local spinner whose fever raged and lymph nodes swelling grotesquely. Sister Agnes, head of wards, hovered nearby, scaling a wooden ladder to retrieve a jar of honeyed vinegar. Soothingly, "Easy now," Agnes soothed, dabbing Judith's brow. The spinner moaned, her breathing rattled by laboured coughs. Blood dripped from her nostrils. Across the tiled floor, a bedraggled apothecary named Oswin measured powdered rue and crushed garlic. He stirred them into water, grimacing. "Our poultice does little." A bell tolled. Brother Simeon entered, offering a slip of parchment. "The council demands closure of mass gatherings and markets. They name it pestilence." His voice cracks. cracked. In the courtyard beyond the infirmary, market stalls were being dismantled. Farmers glared at soldiers hauling away barrels of ale. A weaver hurried her loom cover inside, whispering prayers under her breath. Inside, Judith's skin darkened. The first local victim, Sister Agnes, wiped tears. "May God grant mercy," she whispered as she anointed Judith's temples. Matilda placed her trembling hand over the spinners. Outside, the town gates slammed shut. The first victim lay dying, and with her, Marshwell's innocence shattered. Brother Alric crept through the deserted parish church at midnight, his candle casting dancing shadows across pews streaked with wax drips. The oak door groaned shut behind him. He approached the silver-lined font and sprinkled consecrated salt into its basin. He formed an exorcism prayer. "Into thy hands deliver us from pestilence." Then he dipped his fingers and marked a cross on the archway above the door. Outside, wind rattled the stained glass windows. Nearby, Sister Beatrice, perched on a stone buttress, raised a small horn of oil to her lips, psalms of deliverance. Her melody mingled with the rumble of distant bells tolling for the dead. Footsteps echoed. Father Matthias entered, cloak trailing. "Alric, they call you mad to pray in empty halls." Alric offered a smile. "The church is never empty when the faithful cry for aid." He brandished a wooden crucifix. "Our people tremble. Faith must stand between them and oblivion." They moved to the altar, arranging relics of saints and fanning embers in the braziers. The faint scent of incense rose with each incantation, weaving a fragile shield of hope. Beyond the church walls, a lone figure approached, the harbour captain, Ulrich, face gaunt, pleading for sanctuary. Ulrich's eyes met the door. "Come," he breathed, "for here, faith confronts death itself." At dawn in Marshwell's great hall, aldermen in fur-trimmed gowns sat behind a long oaken table, ringed with gargoyle-carved legs. The hall's high windows glowed with pale light. Mayor Godwin pounded the carved hammer, determined. "We cannot watch our people die in the streets." Emphatic, he declared to the gathered council. Merchants, guildmasters, and clergy. "Henceforth, no congregations, no trade until cure or relief arrives." Wearily, Oswin, the apothecary, rose, quill in hand. "Our stocks of herbs are depleted, and the pest houses fill faster than carpenters can build them." The vintner, Master Jocelyn, slammed his goblet. Angry. "My livelihood ends, but the dead outnumber the living. What choice remains?" A cloaked figure, Lady Edith, stepped forward. Calmly, "I have funds to purchase supplies from distant abbeys, but only if the treasurers grant safe passage." Her black gown folded gracefully. Godwin glanced at a tally of deaths nailed to the dais. The number climbed daily. He sighed, resigned. "Write the edict. Close the gates. We seal this town in quarantine. Mercy and order will be our only weapons." Outside, trumpets blared as guards posted the writ on every door. Citizens peered from shuttered windows, hearts heavy with fear, and a sliver of relief that action, however harsh, might yet save them. In the dim alleyways beyond Marshwell's walls, gilded carriages and pack horses clattered into motion. Sir Roland, newly widowed and draped in sable, urged his steed forward. His retinue, clothiers, goldsmiths, and ladies in velvet, clutched trunks of jewels. Lady Amara stood in her courtyard, basket in hand. A wealthy merchant offered her passage. "My lord travels west. Join him if you wish safety." Amara eyed the gleaming coach. "My people remain." She set down her basket of grains. "I will not abandon the town." Nearby, Captain Rowan chased after a runaway squire, pulling him back by the surcoat. Greenville is no refuge. The plague spreads faster across roads. One carriage rolled away as steam rose from horses' nostrils. A wealthy widow in silk leaned from the window, dropping coins to beggars. The gold clattered. Villagers stared in disbelief. As the cavalcade vanished down the lane, Sister Agnes emerged, closing a small gate. May God guide their souls, she whispered, watching the empty track. Amara turned from the departing throng and faced her parishioners in the square. She raised the basket, resolutely. We share what remains: food, faith, and hope. At her words, a ragged cheer rose. In that moment, those who stayed forged their community's true strength. Steadfast hearts united against the invisible scourge. In the emptied Guildhall, wooden planks and hastily erected partitions formed narrow stalls. Inside, the wounded groaned on straw pallets. Matilda moved steadily with a basin of water, dabbing fevered brows. Brother Simeon's lantern revealed sweat streaming down patients' faces. He offered each a prayer and a sprig of rosemary. May its scent drive ill spirits from your flesh. At a corner cot, Judith the spinner clutched Sister Agnes's hand, her voice a rasping whisper. Nearby, a merchant's clerk moaned, clutching a damp cloth to his forehead. The smell of vinegar filled the room. Oswin hurried among them, counting poultices. We have meat broth for 20 more, and no more. He rifled through crates of herbs. From the threshold, Lady Edith entered with baskets of linen. She knelt to swaddle an infant whose mother wept. Stay strong, she murmured. As night fell, the lanterns swayed and a wind moaned through broken windows. The pest house's walls echoed with coughs and cries. Yet within, healers and volunteers worked side by side, their shared purpose glowing brighter than any candle. On a windswept hill outside the town walls, a deep trench yawned beneath the purpling sky. Labourers, villagers and soldiers lowered bodies wrapped in coarse shrouds with solemn care. No prayers could be spoken aloud for fear of contagion. Instead, each placed a handful of earth. Sister Beatrice walked the line, reading silent psalms. Tears glistened on her cheeks as she offered the sign of the cross from a distance. Beside her, Matilda handed candles to the workers, whose faces were etched with grief. A lone trumpeter sounded 3 notes, mourning for the lost, then fell silent. The village reeled at the count. 300 souls interred within hours. From the trench edge, Brother Simeon dropped his lantern in the earth, its flame extinguished under the weight of soil. A hush fell, broken only by the wind and the hollow thud of dirt hitting coffins. When the last shroud covered bare timbers, a mother knelt and wept for the brother she never found. A child pressed against a cryptic epitaph carved into a nearby stone. Here lie the forgotten, yet known to God. As dusk turned to night, the trench stood as a stark testament to death's fury and humanity's humility before the unseen scourge. Late at night, lanterns illuminated a lonely stretch of Tavystone Lane within the sealed city walls. 2 desperate brothers, farmhand Jorin and his wife Elin, clambered over a low timber palisade, seeking food in unquarantined countryside. They crept toward a farmhouse where Lady Amara's stores were rumoured safe. Elin's face was streaked with tears. "Our son is dying," she whispered. Inside, the steward's guard rounded the corner, spears lowered. Jorin froze. Elin's gasp echoed as the guard's torchlight revealed their hollow cheeks. "Quarantine breach!" the guard shouted, sounding his horn. Martina, Lady Amara's steward, emerged bearing a lit torch. "Send them to the pest house firmly," she ordered. Elin fell to her knees, trembling. "Mercy!" she cried. "Our child!" Martina hesitated, then laid a gentle hand on Elin's shoulder. "Your plea is heard, but the law stands," she signaled 2 guards. As they led the couple away, Elin's back slumped. A black dog barked in the yard. Lady Amara appeared at the window above, sorrow in her eyes. She lowered her basket of grain and blew a kiss to Elin. Under the moon, the brothers vanished into the night-chilled streets, victims not only of plague, but of the heart's harshest edges. In a dusty chamber of Stormhaven Abbey's library, Master Elric pored over illuminated manuscripts by candlelight. Mortar and pestle sat beside jars of rare herbs and powdered minerals. A storm raged beyond stained glass windows, rain rattling the panes. He prepared a concoction of mandrake root and powdered charcoal. formulas from ancient medical texts. If this tincture can draw out the poison, he trailed off, tasting a drop on his finger. His face twisted in pain, but he pressed on. A battered messenger stumbled in, clutching news of fresh deaths. Elric turned, eyes bloodshot. "Fetch the infirmary chief," he commanded. Moments later, Sister Agnes entered, bearing a fevered patient. Elric applied the tonic to the patient's skin. The woman groaned, muscles twitching. He frowned. The dose is too weak, or the plague too strong. He scribbled frantic notes. Outside, bells tolled for the dead. Elric paused, candles sputtering. He gathered more obscure ingredients. Powdered silver, rose petals, and eagle's feather. "One last trial," he whispered, steeling himself. He administered a second, riskier dose. The patient's pulse steadied. Colour returned to her cheeks. Agnes in relief. Elric sank to a stool, exhales trembling. Thunder boomed. In that small chamber, science and faith entwined in a defiant hope. That knowledge, however imperfect, might yet save lives. Weeks of mourning had etched hollow cheeks and slow steps among Marshwell's survivors, but on the crest of a low hill, Lord Alaric's banner, white dove on green, fluttered above linen tents and wooden crosses. A convoy of relief wagons rolled through the reopened gate, bearing sacks of grain, barrels of vinegar, and chests of medicinal herbs from allied abbeys. Lady Edith and Sister Agnes stood to greet them, tears in their eyes. Children peered from behind them, clutching cloth dolls. Brother Simeon led a procession in prayer. Villagers, soldiers, and clergy walked together toward the caravan. At its head, Master Elric offered a vial of his newest tonic, marked with hopeful runes. "Take this to the infirmary," he instructed. In the pest house yard, patients stirred as the medicinal brew was passed among them. Judith lifted her head, colour returning to her cheeks. The first truly recovered faced the dawn. As sunlight broke through clearing clouds, the townspeople gathered in the square. Amara addressed them from a makeshift pulpit. "We have endured famine, war, and plague, but we stand alive, together." A cheer rose, cautious yet genuine. The plague's shadow recoiled before communal resilience and the dawning promise of healing. On that hill, in the burnished morning, hope took root once more. The pale light of dawn revealed rolling hills scarred by smoke. From a distant ridge, the rhythmic beat of war drums echoed, a pulse of impending battle. In a captain's tent, banners hanging limp, Captain Rowena paced alongside Tristan and Roland. She tapped a gauntleted finger on a map inked with enemy positions. Thoughtful. "Each beat brings them closer," she said. Tristan clenched his fist. "Our archers must hold the ridge." Ronan nodded, adjusting straps on his helm. Outside, squires and pikemen readied themselves. A young drummer boy, face set with grim resolve, gripped his sticks. Each tap seemed to quicken hearts. As the drum roll swelled, Rowan raised her sword. Determined. "Stand firm. Today we test steel and spirit alike." Under her command, the camp stirred to disciplined life, forging calm before the storm. Golden rays caught the polished rims of shields as pikemen formed a wall beneath the hill. Sir Gareth and Lady Rowena rode its length, urging steady breathing. Behind them, archers notched arrows, eyes fixed on the silhouette of enemy spears. A trumpet shrieked, the first cavalry charge thundered downhill. Dust rose in waves, pikemen braced, feet steady and churned earth. Rowan planted her halberd and shouted commands. Each soldier met his partner's shield, a pact of iron and trust. As the cavalry clashed, arrows streaked overhead. Tristan loosed bolt after bolt, exhaling relief with each fallen horseman. Roland steadied the wounded beside a makeshift medic post. When the sun cleared the ridge, the first enemy ranks lay broken, yet the true battle had just begun. Beyond the battlefield, a nearby village burned. Red-orange tongues licked at thatch roofs as villagers, women and children, fled along smoke-darkened lanes. Amid the chaos, Dr. Elowen and Sister Agnes guided the wounded to safety, while Roland helped carry buckets of water. A grieving mother handed her infant to a passing soldier. Tristan lifted the child gently. "You'll be safe," he whispered. The soldier pressed a hand to his heart in thanks. Amid collapsing walls, smoke-choked residents huddled under church arches. Watching over them, Elowen dispensed bandages and comforted fears. In this crucible of fire and loss, compassion burned as fiercely as the flames. In a battered manor house's great chamber, Lord Alaric convened a war council. A long oaken table bore maps stained with candle wax. Sir Gareth, Lady Rowena, Sir Roland and Master Aldrich clustered around, voices hushed but urgent. Gravely, "The enemy will flank us at the forest's edge," Gareth warned, tracing a route. Aldrich countered, assertively. "Our trebuchets can stop their cavalry if placed here." Rowan tapped a spot on the map. Urgently, "We must hold the bridge. Lose it, and all retreats are cut off." Alaric nodded grimly. "Resolute. Then we stake our lives on that crossing. Prepare the men." Each advisor departed, resolve forged in the heat of strategy. A narrow stone bridge arched over a swollen river. As enemy cavalry thundered toward it, Sir Gareth stationed his knights on its parapets. Rowan led pikemen at the far end. Tristan and Roland flanked her with crossbows. The first rider charged. Splinters flew as pikes met hooves. Arrows struck shields, steel rang. The bridge quaked under the fray. Gareth spurred his horse forward, sword raised. Rowan countered a mounted knight's lance with a single strike that rang like thunder. When the last horse fell, silence reigned, broken only by dripping water and ragged breaths. Victory carried a bitter taste amid broken planks and wounded friends. At noon, willow trees sheltered a makeshift field hospital. Tents of linen and wool lined the grass, each marked with a red cross. Dr. Elowen directed orderlies, while Sister Beatrice whispered blessings. Roland carried a stretcher, bearing a grievously wounded pikeman. "Soothing, hold fast," Elowen soothed, cleaning a deep gash. Nearby, Tristan poured water over a tattered bandage. Each life saved felt like a triumph over death's shadow. In a quiet tent corner, Sir Roland took trembling notes on treatments, determined to learn from every wound. Under these verdant boughs, compassion and skill converged to mend both flesh and spirit. Under a crescent moon, Rowena led a small unit across enemy lines to sabotage siege engines. Lanterns bobbed at her side as she whispered instructions to her veterans. They slipped past sentries, severing ropes and dismantling wheels. Sparks flew when Roland's dagger struck iron. A sudden shout, alarm sounded. Pikes rose in a frantic dawn red, and the raiders melted back into the woods, leaving chaos behind. Each footstep carried the peril of discovery. Each heart beat for comrades under siege. By sunrise, only silence and disabled engines marked their daring feat. War Council reconvened at dusk. Only 5 of the original 8 advisors present. Losses weighed heavy. Aldrich's trebuchet destroyed, squires wounded. Gareth rubbed his temple by candlelight. "We must choose. Press on or withdraw?" he asked quietly. Rowan met his gaze. "Withdraw across the river. Regroup with our allies." Roland hesitated but nodded. Alaric, weary yet resolute, drummed his fingers. "We survive another day, only to preserve the realm's future." A solemn pact was sealed in the flicker of candle flames. At midnight, pontoons were readied on the river's edge. Soldiers filed across makeshift bridges as enemy arrows whined overhead. The pontoons swayed, planks groaned under ironclad boots. Tristan steadied a nervous pikeman. Roland hefted a wounded man onto his back. Rowan held off stragglers with her halberd, deflecting bolts. Gareth brought up the rear, sword drawn. By dawn, the last footfall sounded on the far bank. The river's roar swallowed the enemy's cheers. Exhausted but alive, they collapsed on foreign soil, safe for now but forever changed. When sunlight filtered through the morning mist, the army camped in a green meadow. Fires dotted the grass, cooking pots bubbled with meagre stew. Soldiers and villagers tended horses and patched armor. Sir Gareth convened the weary leaders on a fallen tree trunk. Thoughtful, We have lost much, but our bond endures. He held Rowan's hand. Roland and Tristan exchanged hopeful glances. A gentle breeze stirred the banner of the Black Stag. Under its tattered folds, they vowed to rebuild, stronger, wiser, and unbroken by war's inferno. The lantern's flicker danced against rough-hewn beams in the baker's cellar behind closed doors. Sir Roland crouched beside a stout wooden barrel, his cloak wrapped tightly around him. Across the low table, Lady Edith leaned forward, voice low but urgent. "We cannot endure another winter under the steward's iron," she hissed, eyes gleaming. Around them sat 5 rebels, a blacksmith's daughter, a disgruntled miner, 2 weary soldiers, and a monk in patched robes. Each bore the toll of recent hardships, hollow cheeks, calloused hands, and haunted eyes. Roland tapped a parchment dotted with makeshift stamps. Determined, I secured support from the southern hamlets. They'll send pikes and provisions if we act before dawn. His voice was steady but fierce. The blacksmith's daughter, Marta, clenched her fist. Angry, my forge lies cold while the wealthy dine. She slammed her palm on the table, rattling clay mugs. Brother Simeon crossed himself. Solemnly, violence begets violence, yet justice may require steel. He tucked the hood of his robe closer, revealing a weathered face lit by candlelight. A hush fell as the monk pressed a vial of blessed oil into Roland's hand. Murmuring, "For the righteous cause," he murmured. Through the rafters, the distant barking of a guard dog reminded them of peril's proximity. Edith rose, pressing her skirts together. Urgent, we leave in an hour. Gather only trusted souls. Failure means ruin for us all. They extinguished the lantern. In the cramped darkness, resolved hearts beat as one. A rebellion's ember kindled in secret, ready to ignite at the first hollow of dawn. Before sunrise, Sir Gareth and Roland crept along the town's back alleys, approaching a cluster of ramshackle lean-tos. A tall, gaunt figure emerged. Jorin, the former chimney sweep, cloak threadbare. "Gareth!" Jorin rasped, recognizing the knight. His eyes were wary. "I've no sword to lend." Gareth placed a reassuring hand on Jorin's shoulder. "Your loyalty is sharper than any blade. We need guides through the sewers." Roland stepped forward, offering a lantern. "You know every passage. Determined. Help us and you'll share in what we reclaim." From a doorway shuffled Ellen, her face streaked with soot and resolve. Resolute. "Our neighbors starve while bailiffs feast," she declared. "We stand with you." Gareth nodded. "We move tonight to seize the granary." Firmly, "Will you lead us beneath the city walls?" Jorin inhaled, torn between fear and hope. Exhaled slowly. At length he bowed. Solemnly, "For my people, I will." As they departed, other outcasts slipped from shadowed doorways. Runaway serfs, wandering minstrels, an exiled clerk, each drawn by whispers of revolt. Their ragged silhouettes vanished into the pre-dawn gloom, forging an unlikely force beneath the city's feet. Moonlight slanted across stacked sacks of wheat as Eadith and Roland slipped through a rusted iron gate into the locked granary yard. Marta, the blacksmith's daughter, scaled the wall with ease, dropping a rope to the group. Sir Gareth approached the massive wooden doors, oiling the hinges with a stolen vial. A soft click, and they entered the cavernous chamber where grain mounded like sandy dunes. At the far end, 2 guards slumbered on crates of oats, armor discarded at their feet. Silently, Roland crept forward, dagger drawn. With a swift motion, he severed the rope holding the granary lantern aloft. Its crash echoed briefly. One guard stirred. Gareth stepped into the dim pool of light, shield raised. "On your knees!" he commanded. The second guard awoke with a start but found steel at his throat. In a flurry, Roland bound their hands with leather straps. Edith moved among the grain sacks, tapping each with her dagger. "Mark those with the steward's crest," she directed Marta, who branded them with chalk. "These we seize." As the guards' whimpers faded, Jorin emerged from shadow, swinging open the gate. In filtered moonlight, peasants poured in, rolling sacks onto wooden carts. The soft scrape of wood on stone echoed like an anthem of deliverance. By the time the town dogs barked their alarm, the granary lay claimed. Its bounty saved from greed and destined to feed the hungry at last. At the town's central crossroads, torches burned as the steward's militia assembled, halberds and crossbows at the ready. Gareth led his ragtag force from the western gate, grain carts rattling behind. Their banners were makeshift, a white cloth stitched with a black stag. A captain in buff coat stepped forward. "You dare steal the steward's property?" he barked. Gareth dismounted, angry, eyes blazing. "Property stolen from the poor is stolen from us all." He raised his sword. Bolts hissed. Roland returned fire, felling 2 militia before they could draw pikes. Marta swung a hammer at a halberd shaft, shattering wood. The monk raised his cross, praying over the wounded. Amid the clash, Eadith rode along the flank, urging peasants with flails to hold formation. Jorin guided carts to safety down side alleys. Sparks flew from steel, shouts and prayers mingled in the night air. When the militia faltered, Roland blew a hastily carved horn. Rebels pressed the advantage, sending the steward's men reeling toward the barracks. Their disciplined ranks broke, and the crossroads lay open. Gareth sheathed his bloodied blade. "Hold fast," he commanded. "Our victory must become their liberation." As dawn tinted the sky, the rebels, unexpected heroes, stood guard over the grain, ready to feed a reborn community. Torchlight revealed jubilant villagers gathered in the market square, the grain distributed in open sacks. Eadith stood atop a cart, cup raised. "To our shared bounty," she toasted. Cheers and cries of relief rippled through the crowd as hungry mouths found sustenance at last. Sir Gareth observed from the shadows with Roland at his side. Marta danced with children, and Jorin watched tearfully as neighbours embraced. Yet beneath the celebration, wary eyes tracked the returning militia patrols. "Rejoice," Gareth murmured, "but stay vigilant." He unhooked a hooded cloak from Roland's saddle. "Put this on. We move tonight to secure allies in the north. The steward will not relent." Roland nodded, heart alight. As villagers feasted, the rebels slipped away under the silvered rooftops, victors in one battle, but architects of a lasting struggle for justice. A pale moon hung low over St. Ethelred's chapel, as lanterns appeared one by one along the worn stone path. Sir Roland, Lady Edith and Gareth Duval stood before the heavy wooden doors, each gripping a borrowed lantern. Inside, the pews were occupied by rebels in patched cloaks and simple hose, blacksmiths, weavers, peasants, even a handful of disgruntled militiamen. Marta the blacksmith's daughter climbed onto the altar rail, setting her lantern on the carved lectern. Resolute. "Friends," she began, voice echoing beneath centuries-old vaults. "Tonight we rise not for greed, but for justice. The steward starves our children while dining on our misfortune. This ends at dawn." A chorus of murmurs rippled through the crowd. Jorin, the chimney sweep turned guide, stepped forward, determined. "Our paths lie secret, but our goal is clear. Seize the steward's manor before he can call for reinforcements." He unfurled a hastily drawn map, and the rebels leaned in to study its scrawled routes through back alleys and hidden courtyards. Brother Simeon raised his voice in prayer, invoking blessings on their cause. Solemnly, "May truth guide our steel, and mercy temper our wrath." The group closed circles of clasped hands, hearts pounding in unison. A candle's flame flickered, casting dancing shadows on stone pillars. As the final words fell, Roland lifted his lantern high. Firmly, to the manor. Quietly, swiftly, and without hesitation. At his signal, the company filed out through a hidden side door, the bell of midnight tolling behind them. The chapel redarkened, but the fire in each revel's breast burned brighter than any torch, a sworn oath to reclaim their homes. Under a star-blanketed sky, the rebels pressed through narrow lanes, their lanterns hooded to conceal all but scarce pools of light. Sir Gareth led the vanguard, eyes sharp against the pale stone walls of the steward's district. Behind him, Roland carried the map. Eadith and Jorin flanked the carts laden with ropes and tools. Marta scouted ahead, moving like a wraith across rooftops. She signaled the others to halt. Below, 2 guards paced before the manor's iron-bound gates, their halberds glinting. Marta returned and whispered, "Wait for my mark." Moments later, Roland knelt by a trapdoor in the alley, an old servant's entrance. He loosened the rusted ring. It creaked softly. Each rebel, holding breath, suppressed a breath. With quiet precision, they lowered ladders and prepared grappling hooks against the outer wall. Gareth raised a gloved finger. "Climb in pairs." Tassels from cloaks brushed rooftops as the first pairs ascended. The air smelled of dew and shadow. Below, Jorin kept watch. His chimney-sweep eyes scanned for any flicker of torchlight. Suddenly, a distant dog, howling, bayed. Eadith pressed her hand to Roland's arm. "Steady." The rebels froze. The dog's cry subsided. Gathering courage, they continued. Soon, every rebel melted inside the manor's defences, leaving only striped shadows on cobblestones. At the rooftop edge, Marta dropped a rope into the courtyard. One by one, they descended into the manor's heart. Silent as ghosts, but unified in purpose. The final lantern winked out, and the stillness held its breath before the storm of revolt. Candles flickered in the grand oak-panelled hall as the steward, Lord Harrick, reclined in his high-backed chair. He looked up in surprise when Lady Edith and Sir Roland strode in, swords drawn but unraised. Behind them, rebels spilled through arched doorways. Miners with picks, knitters with shears, farmers with pitchforks. "Your reign of starvation ends tonight," Edith declared, her voice echoing on the polished floor. Harrick's gaudy doublet rippled in torchlight. He stood, surprised, startled, clutching a gold chalice. "You dare defy me." Roland advanced, placing a gauntlet on the chalice. "We reclaim what you hoarded, grain, coin, and our dignity." Marta and Jorin secured the door, while the monk, Brother Simeon, sprinkled holy water in the corners, an act of consecration against tyranny. Harrick's guards spilled into the hall. Halberds and swords met rebel steel. The hall erupted in clashing iron and shouted prayers. Gareth emerged atop the dais, blades slicing darkness. He parried a guard's thrust and knocked him back against the tapestry. Amidst the fray, Edith disarmed the steward, kicking aside his guard's sword. Roland restrained Harrick by the collar. The great chandelier swayed as torches glittered and dust motes danced. When the final guard fell, silence crashed over the hall. Edith held her sword's tip at Harrick's throat. "Your sentence, exile or penury. Choose." Harrick, trembling, dropped his gaze. A hush settled. The rebels lowered weapons, staff and tool fighters breathing heavily. In the centre of the hall, the old order lay broken, ready for the justice of a new dawn. By candlelight in the steward's private chamber, Lady Edith and Sir Gareth unfurled a parchment charter across a carved desk. Rebel leaders, Marta, Jorin, the monk, and 2 veteran soldiers gathered. Each dipped a finger in ink and pressed it to the margin, sealing their pledge to equitable rule. Brother Simeon intoned a benediction, solemnly, "May our oaths bind us to mercy and justice from this day forth." The candle flame danced on his weathered face. Outside, the chapel bell tolled as villagers assembled in the courtyard. Roland and a group of squire-turned-messengers carried copies of the charter to each quarter of the town. The air was thick with expectancy. In the courtyard, Edith stood upon the granary steps, announcing, "By our hand," she announced, "no family shall go hungry while stores exist. Fair rents and open counsel shall guide our future." She broke the quill and handed the charter to a humble clerk whose fingers shook with pride. A roar rose from the assembled crowd, cheers, clapping of hands and tears of relief. From behind the rebel ranks, children waved scraps of cloth as banners. In that moment, the old steward's seal lay shattered, and a new covenant bound the community in shared hope. As the first pale light of morning filtered through the clouds, the village green transformed into a scene of jubilation. Long trestle tables groaned under loaves of grain from the reclaimed granary. Stews simmered over open fires. Rebels and villagers alike shared benches in a single cord of unity. Sir Gareth and Lady Edith, clad not in armour but in simple tunics, circulated among the tables, offering bread to the weakest. Marta served bowls of porridge to children, laughter lighting her soot-stained face. Jorin directed musicians, drummers and pipers, whose tunes rose in a buoyant procession. On a raised dais, Roland read aloud the new charter's preamble. We, the people of Marshwell, hold these rights in trust for all. As each line ended, the crowd responded with enthusiastic, "So be it!" Sister Agnes passed baskets of herbs to mothers, and Brother Simeon blessed each dish with a sprinkling of rosemary. The steward's manor loomed silent in the distance, a monument to what once was. When the sun cleared the treetops, a great cheer echoed across fields. The scars of famine and plague receded in the warmth of shared bread and song. Under vibrant pennants, stitched from repurposed cloth, the community tasted not only sustenance, but the sweetness of solidarity. As the feast carried on, Sir Gareth raised his cup, raising voice to all who dared to dream of justice, and to every hand that helped forge it. The revellers echoed his toast, voices mingling in hope and harmony. Morning light broke over the ridges of Ridgeford, illuminating freshly broken earth where once only cracked furrows lay. Thomas the miller stood behind a sturdy ox team, guiding the plough through soil turned brown and lifeless by last year's drought and war. At his side, Marta, the weaver, hands still stained with indigo, held seed sacks brimming with hardy barley, last year's charity from the reclaimed granary. Softly, "Keep the beam steady," Marta advised, voice soft under her linen hood. Thomas nodded, boots sinking into the soft earth. Behind them, a dozen villagers laboured. Farmers returned from exile, soldiers whose swords now lay sheathed, and widows who had lost everything but hope. Each drop of sweat was a promise of new life. Near the hedgerow, Brother Simeon knelt in prayer, scattering blessed water over the freshly turned rows. He whispered a benediction. May these seeds take root in faith and courage. A small boy, Thomas, son of the blacksmith, watched with wide eyes, clutching a wooden hoe almost as tall as himself. As the sun rose higher, the field bustled like a hive. Agnes the healer approached with a basket of herbal compost. Time for resilience, yarrow for nourishment. She and Marta mixed the compost into the grown seed, murmuring rites of renewal. By noon, the new furrows stretched to the horizon, dark and hopeful against an azure sky. The long months of famine and plague felt distant as families gathered for a modest midday meal of gruel. Laughter, tentative but genuine, rose above the fields. Thomas paused to rest his back, looking over the furrows as his oxen munched on fresh grass. Thoughtful. We sow not just seed, but our future, he said. Marta smiled, resting a hand on his arm, and the harvest will feed both body and spirit. The bones of collapsed thatch and splintered beams lay scattered across the village square, reminders of last season's fire and neglect. Under a bright autumn sky, craftsman Giles the carpenter measured a new oak beam for the rebuilt barn, his leather apron dusted with sawdust. At his elbow, Isolde the potter arranged clay tiles salvaged from the old roof. "Square at the joints, Giles," calling Rowan the tanner, steadying the timber with broad shoulders. His hands bore calluses from both hide and hammer. Nearby, young apprentices, among them Thomas the boy ploughman, passed buckets of water in lines of freshly cut planks. A group of women carried baskets of linen and rushes for the new roof. Marta sewed them into tight bundles, while Agnes, the healer, supervised with a sharp eye, ensuring no nails injured careless fingers. She offered a comforting word to Anna the baker, whose husband remained at the field. "One beam at a time," Agnes urged. "Our strength grows with each nail." In the center of the square, Lady Eardith oversaw the mason's work on the ruined chapel wall. Her presence lent encouragement. The stones of faith must stand as firm as our resolve. The mason tapped each block into place, mortar oozing before being smoothed by a trowel. Children wove long ropes of straw for temporary shelters as they ran between posts. The clang of hammer on timber and the smell of fresh clay mixed with the earthy scent of turned soil. By dusk, the barn frame stood proud, its skeleton a testament to communal will. Flickering lanterns revealed faces bright with accomplishment. Giles wiped his brow and exchanged a nod with Isolde. "We rebuild more than structures," he said. "We rebuild our bond." A procession wound along the forest path toward the recently founded Abbey of St. Clair. Monks in grey habits led the way, chanting verses that echoed beneath ancient oaks. Behind them followed villagers from Ridgeford, farmers, weavers and smiths, each carrying offerings, woven cloth, cured meats, sturdy boots. At the head walked Lady Eardith, cloak clasped with a simple silver brooch. She carried a small reliquary of St. Clair's finger bone, wrapped in crimson velvet. Beside her, Brother Simeon supported old Gunnar, who had lost his sight in the plague but insisted on walking. "Your steps light our souls," Gunnar rasped. Pilgrims paused at a shaded glade to leave sprigs of rosemary and basil, symbols of remembrance and healing. A nun emerged from the trees, distributing cups of cool spring water, chanting, "Drink and be renewed." Children sipped eagerly, their laughter mingling with the monks' hymns. Approaching the stone facade of the abbey, the group beheld its graceful arches and newly laid gardens. Sister Beatrice stepped forward to welcome them, her face radiant. "Here, all wounds of body and spirit may find solace." Inside, the high nave glimmered with candlelight. Villagers knelt before the altar, touching the reliquary to their brows. A hush fell as Brother Simeon recited a blessing. "May mercy and hope flourish in every heart." When the service concluded, pilgrims shared in a simple repast of bread, cheese, and honeyed wine. Conversations buzzed, plans for healing herbs, rebuilding farms, and teaching children at the Abbey's fledgling school. As the sun set behind the spires, Lady Eardith gazed over the kneeling crowd and whispered, "This sanctuary will guide the rebirth of our land." The monks nodded in agreement, for in faith's new home, the promise of renewal shone brightest. The central market square buzzed with the cautious excitement of a first post-plague fair. Stalls lined with bolts of bright cloth, baskets of apples and jars of honey stretched beneath woven canopies. The scent of freshly baked bread mingled with the tang of cured meat. Marta the weaver displayed indigo-dyed linens, her fingers deftly aligning patterns. A travelling spice merchant, Garrett, arranged sacks of cinnamon and pepper, drawing curious glances from onlookers. "Ah! A pinch to warm the belly and lift the spirit," he called. At a nearby stall, Thomas the miller offered fine white flour at half price. Leaning on his counter, his apprentice Sonia handed slices of warm bread to hungry passers-by. Children clustered for crumbs, their laughter a melody of hope. Lady Eardith and Sir Gareth wandered the stalls, distributing small coins to traders. They paused at the blacksmith's booth, admiring a newly forged ploughshare. "May this help you till fruitful fields," Eardith said. The smith nodded, pride in his coal-darkened face. Brother Simeon moved through the crowd, sprinkling holy water from a silver aspergillum, a blessing for safe commerce. A hush fell as he passed, then murmurs of gratitude followed. At the square's centre, a minstrel began to play on a hurdy-gurdy. Villagers formed a circle, dancing in time to his tune. Under fluttering pennants, stitched from repurposed cloth, they celebrated commerce's return and the promise of abundance. As dusk approached, lanterns were lit, and traders began packing unsold goods. The market's renewal wasn't complete, Fear of plague lingered, but each sale, each shared loaf, wove the fabric of a community determined to thrive. Within the refurbished Guildhall, sunlight streamed through stained glass windows depicting scenes of harvest and charity. At a long oaken table sat a diverse council: Lady Edith in plain surcoat, Sir Gareth in travel-worn cloak, Brother Simeon in grey habit, Martha the weaver, Thomas the miller, and Sonia the baker's apprentice, her young face alight with determination. Isolde the potter read aloud the draft statutes: fair rents, communal granary reserves, and open courts for disputes. Each clause was met with nods. Thomas tapped the table thoughtfully. Thought for rents must reflect harvest yields. No one starves again because of unfair levies. Martha rose. And guild dues. Weavers should train apprentices freely when looms stand idle. Sonia added, energetic, children must learn to read so they can know their rights. Brother Simeon blessed each addition with a quiet prayer. Outside, villagers gathered at the doors, peering in through latticed arches. A clerk transcribed every word onto fresh parchment, his quill scratching with solemn care. When the final article was read, mandating charity to the sick and widows' relief, a cheer echoed through the hall's rafters. Lady Edith rose and dipped her quill in ink, pressing her signature with steady hand. One by one, council members did the same, their inked fingertips a testament to shared governance. Gareth signed last, sealing the pact, solemn. For the good of all, by the will of the people. When the doors opened, the crowd surged forward, embracing council members. Torches blazed as the new statutes were proclaimed aloud in the square. In that vaulted hall, old hierarchies bowed to collective hope, the final anchor of renewal after decades of devastation. Sunlight filtered through newly installed mullioned windows of the humble schoolroom, illuminating rough-hewn benches and a simple chalkboard propped against the far wall. Sister Beatrice, dressed in a modest grey habit, stood before eager faces: Thomas, the miller's son, Sonia, the baker's apprentice, and a handful of children whose families once toiled in plague and famine. "Good morning, class," she greeted, voice gentle. She traced a neat A on the board with chalk. "Today we learn the letters that unlock the world." Martha the weaver peered through the doorway, carrying spare quills fashioned from goose feathers. At her side, Brother Simeon bore a small box of ink. They set the supplies on a rough oak table as children clustered around. Sister Beatrice continued, "This symbol, when paired with this," she gestured to the B, and Thomas's eyes brightened as he copied each shape into his slate. Sonia leaned across her bench to whisper encouragement to a shy neighbour. Outside, Sir Gareth and Lady Edith exchanged proud nods. Gareth murmured, "They learn not only letters but the power of knowledge." Edith happy smiled, placing a hand on his arm. "And with each child our future grows stronger." Sister Beatrice walked among the pupils, correcting grips and praising careful work. The afternoon hush, broken only by scratching quill and murmured recitations, felt sacred. In one corner, Roland guided a small group in simple sums, counting pebbles into neat piles. As the final lesson ended, Sister Beatrice dismissed them with a blessing. Children trooped out, slates tucked under arms, laughter echoing in the corridor. Martha and Brother Simeon collected the ink and quills, and Sonia offered to help sweep the floor. The schoolroom stood empty at dusk, its benches still and board chalk-dusted. In that quiet space, the seeds of renewal, once sown by plough and charter, began to sprout in the minds and hearts of the village's youngest. On a gentle slope beyond the ploughed fields, villagers gathered around rows of young saplings, apple, cherry, and pear. Thomas the miller knelt beside a newly planted tree, pressing earth around its slender trunk. Martha the weaver handed him a weathered hoe. Firm at the base, she advised, her hands steady despite the chill. Behind them, Sister Agnes offered buckets of water drawn from the nearby well, while Brother Simeon sprinkled blessed salt around each root. He intoned, "May these trees bear fruit as our village bears compassion." Children, loughing muddy-kneed, followed Sir Roland, who demonstrated proper planting technique with a sapling in hand. "Dig deep, but gentle," he said, guiding little Thomas's hands. The boy's eyes shone. He pressed the sapling upright with pride. Nearby, Lady Edith conversed with Sonia the baker's apprentice, who who fastened a simple wooden marker bearing each family's crest. "We will remember whose tree this is," Sonia noted, tying the marker with twine. Edith nodded, "And generations beyond will taste our perseverance." As the orchard grew, row by row, the village's recent scars seemed to soften under open sky and fresh earth. Farmers returned from exile laid each tree with hope rather than obligation. A chill breeze carried the scent of turned soil and budding leaves. When the final sapling stood in the ground, the community formed a circle around the orchard center. Brother Simeon led a quiet prayer. Sister Agnes distributed crusts of honeyed bread. They raised their offerings to the trees, first nourishment for plant and people alike. Under the warm afternoon sun, the orchard promised abundance. Each rooted sapling symbolized a future nourished by unity, a living testament to renewal flourishing from shared toil. Under colorful pennants strung between timber posts, the village green transformed into a festive fairground. Long benches supported platters heaping with roasted roots, fresh cheeses, and loaves of barley bread. Straw bales served as seats while lanterns swung overhead in anticipation of dusk's glow. A makeshift stage, adorned with ribbons and carved wooden insignia, hosted dancers in bright tunics. Tambourines and fiddles played lively reels. Marta the weaver twirled in a gown of indigo as Thomas the miller led the circle dance. Children chased each other with garlands of wildflowers. Lady Edith stood beneath the largest pavilion alongside Sir Gareth. She raised a silver goblet filled with cider and called for attention. "We celebrate not only the fruits of our labor, but the bonds that carried us through famine, war, and plague." Gareth nodded, adding, "May this harvest remind us that shared joy is as vital as shared work." A cheer rose and the feast commenced. Sister Beatrice moved among the tables, blessing each course with a sprinkling of rosemary. Brother Simeon offered brief benedictions at intervals, his voice melding with music. Roland served bowls of spiced porridge to elders who had endured the darkest seasons. One old woman set down her spoon to smile at the pageant of rebirth, her rheumy eyes reflecting firelight and hope. As night fell, lanterns flared bright, and the aroma of spiced wine and roasted chestnuts filled the air. Dancers continued their whirl, and the feast's laughter echoed across the green. In that night of celebration, the community tasted renewal's sweetness, their hearts full for a brighter year ahead. At the edge of Ridgeford, Sir Roland led a small delegation along the forest road toward the neighbouring township of Eastbrook. Riding alongside him were Lady Edith, Brother Simeon, and Marta the weaver. Each carried gifts, bolts of cloth, jars of honey, and baskets of fresh produce. The Eastbrook gates opened to reveal Mayor Geoffrey and his council standing beneath ivy-clad walls. Geoffrey stepped forward. "Ridgeford's revival is no small feat," he greeted, voice formal yet warm. "We welcome your friendship and these generous offerings." Edith dismounted gracefully and presented a bolt of indigo linen. "May our craft serve your tables and our alliance strengthen both towns." Geoffrey accepted it with a respectful bow. Roland handed baskets of produce. Marta offered honey jars, while the monk raised a chalice of spiced wine in blessing. Brother Simeon intoned, "May peace and plenty flow between us as freely as this wine." Inside the council hall, its long table etched with symbols of harvest, the two towns negotiated shared grain reserves and safe passage for traders. Thomas the miller and Eastbrook's miller exchanged technical know-how for improved water wheel designs. Sonia, the baker's apprentice, taught local children to weave simple loaves. As the sun set beyond stained glass windows, the treaty was sealed with a shared feast. Banners of both townships were raised side by side outside the gates. Edith and Geoffrey clasped forearms in the traditional greeting of mutual respect. The diplomatic mission returned by lantern light, their pack horses laden with Eastbrook's smoked fish and salted herbs. In unison, they proclaimed that community rebuilding extended beyond fields and granaries. It required bonds of fellowship woven between neighbours. On a misty dawn, the villagers gathered at the hilltop mass grave, where hundreds had been laid in plague's height. Simple wooden crosses, each bearing a name or a family symbol, marked the frozen earth. Sir Gareth and Lady Edith stood at the head, flanked by Sister Beatrice and Brother Simeon. Roland and Sonia carried a wreath of rosemary, thyme, and daisies. Marta, the weaver, held an embroidered cloth listing the lost, a tapestry of memory. Villagers, farmers, smiths, weavers, and children stood shoulder to shoulder, heads bowed against the quiet wind. Brother Simeon began the service, voice resonant, solemn. Here lie those whose faces fade from memory, but whose spirits guide our steps. He sprinkled holy water along each row of crosses. Sister Beatrice chanted a plaintive hymn as the sun's first rays crowned the graves in pale gold. Edith stepped forward and placed the wreath at the center cross, dedicated to the unknown. Her voice trembled with both sorrow and strength. Trembling, may these stones remind us of the cost of survival and the promise of compassion. She draped Marta's embroidered cloth across the central marker. One by one, villagers approached to lay flowers, dandelions, violets, simple wild stems, at each cross. A hush fell, broken only by the quiet rustle of gown and cloak. Roland lifted a small child onto his shoulders, showing him the rows of names. "We remember," the child whispered. When the final prayer concluded, the group lingered, embraced, and shared silent tears. Then, as a gentle breeze scattered petals across the markers, they turned toward the village below, resolved to honor the fallen by living fully, in service and unity, beneath the renewed sky. By the river's silver bend, the old wooden toll bridge groaned under recent floods. Giles the carpenter oversaw repairs. He measured planks against ancient beams, while Rowan's tanner apprentices resin-sealed joints to repel moisture. At his side, Marta the weaver stretched tar-soaked ropes as handrails, and Roland checked the steadiness of each plank. Nearby, villagers, farmers and children, laid bundles of rushes to line the walkway. Sister Beatrice passed hot tea to working hands, her gentle smile urging steady progress. Sir Gareth lifted the final beam into place, while Lady Edith affixed a carved wooden post, bearing the village's new crest. As the afternoon sun warmed the timber, the bridge stood firm once more, a lifeline for traders and pilgrims. Villagers tested its span with cautious steps, breaking into Luffisherlow when the final rush lining rustled underfoot. The restored bridge symbolized not only passage over troubled waters, but the community's own crossings, from hardship into hope. On a gentle slope near the Abbey's herb garden, Sister Agnes guided volunteers through neat rows of lavender, mint, and sage. Agnes showed Thomas the miller's son how to snip flower heads without damaging roots, while Marta and Sonia carefully packed bundles into wicker baskets. Brother Simeon oversaw the drying racks. He tied stems in bundles and hung them beneath the eaves of the infirmary. Dr. Elowin tasted a mint leaf, nodding approval. Thoughtful. "These will soothe fevers and calm nerves," she said. Roland laid out labeled jars: chamomile for sleep, yarrow for wounds, thyme for strength. As bees hummed among blossoms, villagers worked in companionable silence, interrupted only by shared smiles and stories of recovery. By dusk, the healing harvest was complete. Fragrant bundles and jars that would bolster bodies and spirits through the coming winter. Steam rose from the river mill's wheel as Thomas the miller and apprentices cleared debris from broken gears. Sir Gareth and Giles steadied a heavy cogwheel, while Roland checked the water channel for obstructions. Marta and Isolde smoothed fresh plaster on the mill's wheelhouse walls. With a final nod, Thomas signaled the water's flow. The wheel began to turn at first, then spinning smoothly. Grain bags shifted as the millstones ground amber kernels into fine flour. Children, women tested the first white flour in steaming loaves. Lady Edith and Sister Beatrice watched from the bank, exchanging relieved smiles. "This mill's rebirth ensures our bread will rise again," Edith said. Under a pavilion draped in fresh rushes, the village organized a special feast for its elders. Long tables bore bowls of pottage, platters of roast root vegetables, and baskets of freshly baked bread. Martha the baker's daughter set each plate with care, while Thomas the miller poured cider into wooden goblets. Elder Margaret, trembling but radiant, led the blessing. "May these gifts honor your years and guide us in years to come." Applause and heartfelt toasts followed. Lady Edith personally served Margaret a bowl, kneeling in respect. Roland and Sonia fetched blankets and pillows, ensuring comfort for arthritic joints. As the sun dipped low, laughter and stories wove warmth through the cool evening air. The elders, once isolated by infirmity, found solace in shared abundance and the community's gratitude. In the open meadow beside the keep, Captain Rowena trained a new militia of villagers, tailors, gardeners, and blacksmiths who had volunteered to defend the village. She demonstrated footwork with a training pole, while Roland coached archery under Master Bowman Aldwin's watchful eye. Thomas the miller hefted a spear awkwardly. Marta guided his stance. From the sidelines, Sir Gareth corrected pike formations, ensuring shields interlocked. The recruits listened intently, determined to protect the homes they had rebuilt. As the drill concluded, Rowena addressed the group. "You stand as guardians of hope. Remember your training and each other." A cheer rose, and villagers dispersed, carrying weapons with newfound. In the refurbished Guildhall's east wing, rows of wooden shelves now held manuscripts and books donated by neighbouring towns. Sonia the apprentice dusted shelves as Sister Beatrice arranged scrolls of herbal lore. Roland hung a carved sign reading, "Ridgeford Library." Lady Edith and Sir Gareth cut a ribbon of linen, unveiling the library to assembled villagers. "May knowledge enlighten every mind," Edith proclaimed. Children rushed forward, eyes bright, eager to explore tales of history and science. Brother Simeon led a group in a reading circle. He recited passages from a psalter in Cletones, while Marta translated an herbal compendium into the vernacular. The atmosphere hummed with curiosity and promise. Along the village perimeter, villagers planted grapevines to nourish future harvest festivals. Giles guided the digging of holes. Marta taught children to tie young vines to support stakes. Thomas fetched water barrels, as Roland and Sonia placed vines in neat rows. Lady Edith poured a libation of first-pressed juice at the inaugural vine, blessing the row. "May these vines intertwine our lives in joy and resilience." A soft cheer responded as everyone took turns pouring water from ceremonial pitchers. Under fading light, the new vineyard promised a harvest worthy of shared celebrations, an enduring symbol of renewal. In the Guildhall's council chamber, Lady Edith, Sir Gareth, Sister Beatrice, Marta, Thomas and Roland reconvened around the statute-laden table. They discussed next year's ploughing plans, market regulations, and expanding the school. Sonia proposed adult literacy classes. Giles suggested building a granary annex. Brother Simeon recorded each idea in a new codex. When the agenda concluded, Edith raised her cup. "To our partnership, may every voice guide our shared destiny." They drank in unity, ready for the chapters yet unwritten. As twilight deepened, villagers lit hundreds of paper lanterns, each bearing a personal wish for the future. Sister Agnes and Brother Simeon led a silent procession through the orchard and fields, families following with children clutching glowing orbs. At the green's edge, Lady Edith spoke. "Let these lights guide us through darkness." One by one, villagers released lanterns upward. They drifted skyward, a constellation born of hope and remembrance. Silence fell, broken only by whispered prayers and the lantern's soft hum in the night breeze. A luminous vow that the community's spirit would never be extinguished. On the riverbank, beneath flowering willows, Sir Gareth and Lady Yedith paused to reflect. The water's gentle flow mirrored lantern's fading glow from the previous night. Gareth removed his helm, running fingers through tired hair. Yardith laid a comforting hand on his arm, thoughtful. We have suffered much, but look how far we've come. She gestured to the distant mill and church spires, catching dawn's first rays. Tristan and Roland arrived, each carrying a basket of morning bread. They joined the couple, sharing silent gratitude as children played by the water's edge. Brother Simeon approached with a chalice of fresh river water. He offered it as a toast, calmly. To renewal, may our hearts flow as freely as this river, ever moving toward hope. They drank, and the river's soft murmur seemed to echo their vow. That Ridgeford's recovery would endure, carried forward by every hand and heart united. The village green was awash in colour as stalls of flowers and herbal potions lined its perimeter. Villagers dressed in shades of green and gold carried wreaths crafted by Sister Agnes, while Brother Simeon tolled a small bell to mark the festival's opening. At the centre stood a wooden dais draped in hop vines and ivy, where Dr. Elowin presented freshly distilled reviving tonics. Thomas the miller poured cups of cooling barley water spiced with mint, and Marta the weaver handed out linen pouches of lavender. Lady Edith, crowned with rosemary, addressed the crowd.
Today we honor the healing hands that mended our bodies and our souls.
Sir Gareth stood beside her in simple tunic, hands clasped in quiet pride.
Children darted through the crowds, ringing tiny bells, while older villagers exchanged tales of recovery.
At a nearby arbour, Roland demonstrated how to braid medicinal herbs into garlands. Sonia, the baker's apprentice, distributed honey cakes sweetened only with hope. As the sun dipped toward noon, laughter and song wove through the pavilion, a testament to lives restored and spirits rekindled. Matching image prompt. Morning sunlight warmed the abbey courtyard where Master Elric had arranged rows of wooden benches. Townsfolk, young and old, sat rapt as he illuminated a large parchment map of Europe's trade routes. Brother Simeon held a chalk-lined easel, while Sonia and Marta distributed quills and ink for note-taking. Knowledge is the seed of progress, Elric declared, tracing merchant lanes that once lay blocked. Thomas leaned forward, eyes bright with the promise of restored commerce. Lady Edith and Sir Gareth stood at the back, offering silent support. Roland guided small children through copying simple Latin phrases, while Sister Beatrice translated key terms into the vernacular. As the lecture concluded, villagers lined up for questions. A vintner asked about fermentation techniques. A weaver inquired on dye trade. A farmer sought advice on crop leases. Elric answered with patience, his voice carrying through the arches. The courtyard buzzed with excitement, a sanctuary where learning kindled the path to a renewed tomorrow. Freshly plastered walls of the new Guildhall gleamed in afternoon light. Craftsmen of every trade, smiths, weavers, carpenters, gathered inside, admiring carved oak beams etched with symbols of each vocation. Lady Edith cut a green ribbon of woven linen, declaring the hall open for the fellowship of skill and fair commerce. Sir Gareth tapped the silver hammer against a bronze anvil, set by the blacksmith's daughter Marta, and the ring echoed like harmony through the vaulted ceiling. Roland and Sonia distributed carved wooden tokens to each artisan, symbolizing membership and mutual support. Outside, villagers toured workshops. The carpenter demonstrated joint techniques. The weaver displayed colorful looms. The potter shaped clay on a kick wheel. In every corner, the buzz of hammers, looms, and turning wheels spoke of a peninsula reborn by collective craft. Under ancient oak branches strung with lanterns, Ridgeford hosted dignitaries from neighbouring baronies. A long banquet table held platters of venison, roasted grain cakes and bowls of spiced fruit. Lady Eadith welcomed Baroness Selina across the table, offering a goblet of rose-infused mead. Sir Gareth stood guard as ambassadors from Eastbrook to the south and Windmere to the north engaged in courteous exchange. Marta's tapestries of the village's recovery lined the tent interior, a visual testament to resilience. Roland and Sonia circulated, ensuring every guest's cup brimmed. Brother Simeon offered a prayer for unity, and the gathered lords and ladies raised their goblets in agreement. Music from a minstrel trio filled the night air, binding politics and fellowship in a single moment of peace beneath star-dappled leaves. Inside the newly opened schoolhouse, benches groaned under stacks of scrolls and bound volumes. Sister Beatrice led a class of adult learners, farmers, smiths, merchants, through arithmetic and syllabic exercises. Thomas the miller jotted sums in chalk. Marta wrote dye formulas. Sonia copied recipes for spiced bread. Across the room, Master Elric taught map reading and compass use, tracing lines from Ridgeford to distant ports. Roland guided a group through geometric patterns for architectural planning. Lady Edith and Sir Gareth visited each desk, offering encouragement and small tokens of ink and parchment. By candlelight, the students lingered, trading questions and discoveries. The walls echoed with the rustle of parchment and quiet whispers, proof that education, once a privilege of few, now flourished as the village's greatest harvest. A procession of pack horses laden with goods wound along the forest road toward Ridgeford. Bolts of cloth, barrels of salted fish, and crates of exotic spices. The lead rider, a merchant named Garrett, carried Ridgeford's standard. Behind him rode Sir Roland as escort, spear in hand. Marta and Sonia greeted each wagon as it arrived at the toll bridge, checking manifests. Thomas the miller and Dr. Elowen provided hot broth to weary drivers. Lady Edith and Sir Gareth reviewed cargo with Mayor Geoffrey of Eastbrook, ensuring fair tariffs and safe passage ahead. The road's revival spoke volumes. Ridgeford no longer stood isolated, but joined a network of commerce, its people the architects of their own prosperity. In the Guildhall's council chamber, a new charter was unveiled on a carved lectern. Articles ensuring communal forests, grazing lands and water rights. Villagers from every trade pressed in to read the illuminated script. Lady Edith and Sir Gareth presided as Brother Simeon read each decree aloud. Marta, Thomas and Sonia dipped quills in ink to sign as guarantors of the people. A final flourish, the noble couple pressed their seals in wax, symbols that lordship and commoner stood equal in stewardship. Outside, the chapel bell pealed in celebration. Torches lit the frozen market square as Ridgeford welcomed the New Year festival. Bonfires crackled and villagers danced in circles around a towering maypole wrapped in evergreens. A travelling bard recited tales of bygone plagues turned to legends. Children chased sparklers, adults toasted with mulled cider. Lady Edarth crowned the eldest healer, Sister Agnes, with a wreath of holly as thanks for another year of health. Sir Gareth raised his cup and led the crowd in a rousing chorus of hope. Snow began to fall softly, each flake a silent blessing on the reborn community. A stream of pilgrims followed the chapel road, bound for a distant shrine. They carried scallop shells and knapsacks, faces weary but hopeful. Roland and Sonia offered water from wooden cups. Marta handed out small linen sacks of bread. Sir Gareth and Lady Edith greeted the pilgrims at the gate, blessing their journey with whispered prayers. Sister Beatrice led them in chant as they passed beneath the ancient arch. The comings and goings marked Ridgeford's place on the map of faith and renewed purpose. At sunset, Sir Gareth and Lady Edith stood before the weathered stone cross that marked the village's founding. Their hands intertwined, they gazed across fields now green with new growth. Beside them, Roland held a small sapling, a gift for the founder's memorial. Sonia placed a single white rose at the cross's base, reverently. Brother Simeon recited a benediction as Sister Beatrice kindled an oil lamp. The sky blazed crimson, and they bowed in gratitude, knowing that from famine, war, and plague had risen a stronger, wiser community, destined for future chapters, yet unwritten. Before sunrise, a pale mist hovered over the golden barley fields, newly sown last spring. Thomas the miller climbed a wooden watchtower to survey the endless sea of grain rippling in the breeze. Below, Marta the weaver and a team of reapers moved in steady lines, sickles glinting in the first light. "Dawn brings promise," Marta whispered, guiding each cut stalk into neat sheaves. The air smelled of damp earth and straw. Thomas blew a small horn, signaling the harvest's official start. Farmhands cheered, their voices carrying across the fields. Along the hedgerow, Sir Roland oversaw the grain carts, ensuring each wad of barley reached the threshing wheels intact. Sister Beatrice moved among the workers, offering flasks of cool spring water and blessing their toil. "May your labours feed not just body, but the soul." Lady Eadith arrived on horseback at the field's edge, accompanied by Brother Simeon. She raised a slender scythe and cut the first sheaf, passing it to a barefoot boy named Peter. "For every harvest," she said, "we reap the fruits of hope." As the sun climbed, the harvest swelled, carts creaked with bounty, and laughter mingled with the rhythmic slash of sickles. The village's scars, a decade of famine and war, faded under the sound of unity and abundance. In a clearing beside the mill, villagers formed a circle around a massive wooden threshing floor. With muscular swings, farmers like Giles the carpenter and Thomas the miller beat sheaves against the planks. Dust rose in golden clouds, sunbeams cutting through each swirl. Marta knelt at the circle's edge, sifting chaff into baskets. She teased stray grains free. A tune of gratitude. Children pressed forward, gathering stray kernels in cloth sacks, precious as gems. Roland and Sonia passed ale bowls and bread trimmings to the labourers. Cheerfully. "Strength for your arms," calls out Roland, lifting a wooden tankard. A cheer rippled as they drank. Nearby, Sir Gareth directed the winnowing. 2 apprentices tossed grain into the air, letting the breeze carry away husk while fine kernels fell into waiting troughs. Each grain represented survival, each breath a prayer answered. At noon, Sister Beatrice tolling bell, a small bell, signalling a pause. The threshing circle bowed heads in silent thanks. As the dust settled, the gleaming barley lay ready for milling, proof that from earth's hardest furrows, life could flourish anew. In the baker's yard, several clay ovens glowed with heat. Sonia, the baker's apprentice, carried a basket of pale flour from the mill. She tipped it onto a wooden table, alongside yeast and water. Surrounding her, villagers, widows, children, even former militia, took turns kneading dough, their hands coated in pale dust. Lady Eadith and Sister Agnes sprinkled fresh rosemary and honey into bowls of dough for a special harvest loaf. "This bread tastes of community," Eadith said, pressing a final flourish of dough leaves. As the loaves puffed and browned in the ovens, smoke curled into the clear afternoon sky. Tristan tasted a hot crust, nodding in approval. "A miracle of grain and grace," he declared, handing a fresh loaf to a waiting elderly peasant. When bells rang, everyone assembled in the square to break bread. Sonia stood by a trestle table heaped with steaming loaves. Marta handed slices to farmers, knights and clergy alike. Each bite was met with of satisfaction, flavour born of shared hardship and mutual triumph. Under the spreading oak, and crumbs scattered. The simple act of baking, once impossible, now sealed the village's recovery. Nourishment for body, spirit, and the promise of plenty yet to come. The day's light waned as the harvest fair opened along the village's main thoroughfare. Stalls displayed sacks of grain, jars of honey, and crates of herbal salves. A merchant from the coast offered salted fish. A potter displayed hand-painted bowls. Thomas the miller bartered flour for beeswax candles. Martha exchanged woven shawls for spice jars. Brother Simeon blessed each transaction with a sprinkle of blessed water, while Sister Beatrice offered prayers of gratitude. Lady Edith and Sir Gareth presided over the fair's centre booth, where they counted coin fairly and ensured no one was cheated. When a poor widow arrived with empty hands, they gifted her a loaf and a small bag of barley seed, prompting respectful murmurs among bystanders. A minstrel strummed a lute nearby as children danced between stalls, their laughter mingling with bartering calls. The fair's last light glowed in bright hues, crimson, gold, emerald, reflecting both the season's bounty and the community's harmonious spirit. As torches were lit, the fair's end neared, but hearts brimmed with pride. The harvest fueled not only pantries, but solidarity and the promise of renewal in every exchange. Within the cool stone vault beneath the granary, workers piled sacks of newly threshed barley and flour onto sturdy oak shelves. The vaulted ceiling echoed the muffled footfalls of Giles the carpenter and Roland, as they arranged each sack meticulously. Isolde the potter carried barrels of pickled vegetables and salted meat, placing them beside the grain. Martha attached ledger tags to each shelf. Barley, 300 sacks. Flour, 150 sacks. Preserved veg, 20 barrels. Brother Simeon escorted guests, Edith and Sir Gareth, down narrow stairs with lanterns. Edith placed her hand on a fresh sack. "Our winter stores," she said, voice soft with relief. Roland lit additional lanterns, revealing stone walls lined with niches for honey jars. Sonia filled each niche, humming a tune of hope. Thoughtfully, "When the snow falls," she said, "we will draw from these stores." With the vaults sealed and doors locked under vigil, the community's abundance lay secure, proof that from 10 years of calamity had emerged not just survival, but foresight and unity to sustain generations ahead. By mid-morning, a line of heavily laden carts rolled down the dusty road toward neighboring hamlets. Thomas the miller rode atop the lead wagon, his broad smile visible even from afar. Each cart was piled high with sacks of freshly milled flour, barrels of honey, and crates of cured meats, surplus born of Ridgeford's generous harvest. Martha the weaver paused at the gate to present each caravan master with cloth banners stitched in the village's emblem, a sheaf of barley beneath a rising sun. "Let this mark our friendship," she said, tying the banner to the highest pole. Brother Simeon offered a brief blessing. "May these goods feed many and foster peace." Behind the caravans, Roland and Sonia distributed flasks of herbal tonic for the drivers, while Lady Edith held court under a spreading oak, signing safe conduct letters for each master. Sir Gareth oversaw the loading of the last barrels, his gauntleted hand resting on the cart rail. "Travel well, friends," he called. "Carry our goodwill with every mile." As the wagons rattled off, villagers lined the lane, waving cloth scraps and raising wooden cups in salute. Children raced alongside the horses, their laughter mingling with the creak of wheels. From the verge, Sister Beatrice distributed fresh bread to onlookers. In the distance, smoke curled from cottage chimneys as Ridgeford turned its gaze to the horizon. The road beyond their walls had once brought disease and despair. Now it bore abundance and alliance. Each passing wagon carried not only food, but the promise of a future where community extended beyond every furrowed field. In the cool stone cellar beneath the mill, barrels rumbled as they were rolled into position. Dr. Elowen supervised the first experimental brew of Ridgeford ale, crafted from the season's finest barley. Beside her, Thomas held a steaming pot of wort, golden and fragrant, ready for fermentation. Martha, the weaver, lifted a wooden paddle and stirred the mixture, inhaling the sweet, yeasty scent. "This will be our village's signature," she said, eyes sparkling. Roland adjusted the copper spigot on the nearest barrel, testing its seal. "Tight as your tapestry hoops," he teased Martha, and she laughed. Inside the circle of apprentices, Sonia measured hops and honey, adding them in precise proportions. Sister Agnes blessed each ingredient with a sprig of rosemary before it went in, murmuring a prayer for health and merriment. A novice, Matilda, jotted notes in a leather-bound journal, recipes that would endure as part of the village's lore. When the final barrel was filled, Sir Gareth tapped the head bung with a silver mallet. A fountain of frothy ale gushed forth, and villagers cheered. Lady Edith raised a mug and declared, "To the season's bounty and the spirit it inspires." She took a ceremonial sip, nodding approvingly at the ale's smooth warmth. As barrels closed and apprentices wiped spillage with linen cloths, the cellar's torchlight danced on oak beams. From this humble brew would flow festive cups at every celebration, binding body and community in shared delight. The master brewer's triumph was more than flavour. It was a toast to resilience distilled in every drop. At dawn's gentle glow, the villagers assembled in the orchard's heart for the annual seed selection ceremony. Long tables were set beneath fruit trees heavy with last year's yield. Thomas the miller and Martha the weaver laid out trays of barley, wheat and flax seeds, each variety chosen for strength and flavour. Lady Edith, in a gown of embroidered green, presided over the ritual. She dipped her fingers into a bowl of barley and let the grains fall between her palms. "These seeds carry our story," she announced, "chosen by hands that tilled, threshed and stored." Brother Simeon chanted a brief benediction as Sister Beatrice distributed small mesh pouches. Villagers moved along the tables, farmers selected sturdy grains, bakers chose wheats for pliable dough, and weavers picked the longest flax fibres. Each kept precisely 10 kernels or stalks in their pouch, enough to plant a family's share in spring. Roland guided children in counting seeds, teaching them to speak each number aloud as they placed grains into small clay bowls. Their voices rang with purpose. 1, 2, 3. A hush fell as Matilda, the novice, recited a prayer for growth and weather. When every pouch was filled, the crowd released a collective breath. Lady Edith raised hers. "Guard these seeds, our legacy for seasons to come." The villagers echoed her vow. Baskets were sealed and marked, destined to rest in the granary vault until the next cycle of renewal. In that tranquil morning light, the simple act of choosing seeds became a covenant, that every harvest carried the wisdom and hope sown by those before, and those yet to walk the fields. In the Guildhall's sunlit annex, a circle of villagers sat around low tables strewn with freshly cut straw. Martha the weaver led the workshop, demonstrating how to braid stalks into durable mats, baskets and hats. Her deft fingers wove patterns that caught the light like golden threads. Isolde the potter observed, her apron dusted with clay, as she learned to tie the final knot on a wide-brimmed straw hat. "These will shield us from sun and rain," Martha explained, passing the braided hat to Sonia for inspection. Sonia nodded, noting the tightness of each braid. Brother Simeon and Sister Beatrice moved between students, ensuring straw bundles stayed clean and dry. The healer Agnes showed how woven mats could line beds to keep moisture from thatch floors. A carpenter's apprentice tested a small round basket, lifting a handful of apples with pride. Outside the window, Giles the carpenter installed fresh shutters, occasionally glancing in to admire the shapes taking form. Children practiced simple plates at the annex doorway, their small hands tangled but determined. Laughter and soft humming filled the hall. By afternoon's end, a row of finished straw goods lined a wooden rack. Baskets sturdy enough for harvest yields, mats soft enough for newborn cradles, hats flexible enough for every field worker's head. The workshop's creations, born of humble harvest byproduct, spoke of ingenuity and the seamless weave of community craft. As the sun dipped low, villagers gathered once more in the fields they had reclaimed. Torches flickered along the furrows, casting warm pools of light against the twilight sky. Sister Beatrice and Brother Simeon led a silent vigil, their voices rising in a final hymn of gratitude. Lady Edith stood beside Sir Gareth at the field's edge, holding a lantern aloft. In her other hand, she carried a bound volume of community records, the chronicle that began with famine's onset and now bristled with accounts of resilience. "We stand upon their shoulders," she whispered. Gareth squeezed her hand in shared reverence. Around them, villagers knelt in small clusters, offering silent prayers. Thomas the miller poured a jar of fresh spring water into the earth. Marta scattered handfuls of loose straw as a fragrant offering. Roland and Sonia walked the rows, placing candles at regular intervals, each flame a beacon of memory and hope. Children, too young to recall the darkest days, watched in solemn wonder. One little girl, clutching her mother's hand, placed a single blossom at the base of a torch. The petals gleamed in the torchlight, a quiet testament that life flourishes in even the humblest bloom. As dusk surrendered to star-strewn night, the vigil's flames glowed like constellations across the fields. The assembled bowed their heads, hearts unified by the cycle of hardship and renewal. In that final hush before the night fully fell, Ridgeford's people sealed their vow to tend the land, honour the past, and kindle hope for every tomorrow yet to dawn.
The first light of dawn painted the horizon in soft rose and gold, revealing fields that once lay fallow now brimming with ripening barley and flax. From his watchtower perch, Thomas the miller breathed deeply, inhaling the sweet scent of new growth. Below, Marta the weaver guided a team as they gathered flax stalks for twisting into sturdy linen. "Look at how far we've come," Marta said, her fingers caressing the pale fibres. Thomas nodded, tipping his cap in gratitude. In the distance, Sister Beatrice led a small group of children carrying baskets of morning bread to the labourers, each loaf still warm from the ovens. Their laughter carried on the breeze like a living promise. On the riverbank, Sir Gareth and Lady Edith stood hand in hand, watching the barges glide by laden with grain. Brother Simeon blessed the water with olive oil, praying that the river itself remain a source of life and commerce. Roland and Sonia waved as the boats passed, children darting beside them, eager to race the arriving vessels. As the sun fully cleared the trees, the village stirred into a joyful bustle. Mill wheels turned, looms clacked, and the distant toll of the chapel bell marked the new day. In that luminous morning, every face, scarred by loss yet shining with hope, embodied the living legacy of resilience. The age of famine, war, and plague had yielded to an era built on compassion, unity, and the steadfast determination of ordinary souls. Beneath the Guildhall's vaulted ceiling, a new glass-fronted archive had been installed. Shelves held tomes of the village's history, ledger books, personal diaries, and illuminated maps. Sonia the librarian in simple surcoat dusted the spines, while Thomas the miller carried in an iron-bound chest of plague-era petitions. Lady Edith and Sir Gareth stood beside a lectern draped with embroidered cloth, announcing, "Today we honour those who endured and those who perished," Edith announced. She tapped a bronze bell and the assembled townsfolk fell silent. Brother Simeon lit a single candle at the archive's centre. "May these records guide future generations," he intoned. Sister Beatrice read aloud an excerpt from the steward's original edict, a testament to the community's vow that no one suffer unnoticed again. Apprentices, guided by Roland, arranged new volumes, agricultural manuals, herbal compendia, and local statutes. Marta contributed a hand-woven tapestry depicting the great grain seizure and communal feast. Children watched wide-eyed as the tapestry's vibrant scenes unfolded before them. When the inaugural ceremony concluded, villagers filed through the oak doors, each taking a written summary of the archive's contents. In hushed tones, they spoke of lessons learned and vows renewed. The archive stood as a living monument, a bridge between past calamities and the brighter tomorrows built upon shared memory. At twilight in the manor's great hall, long tables were set for a harvest supper, honouring both the living and the dead. Plates of roasted game, root pottage, and sweet griddle cakes arrayed beneath brass candlesticks. Elder Margaret, draped in silver brocade, moved between guests, offering words of comfort. Sir Gareth rose to address the gathering.
Tonight we celebrate not only the fruits of our labor but the memory of those who never returned. His voice echoed warmly across the hall. Lady Edith followed, distributing small wooden tokens engraved with a sheaf of barley, symbols of hope carried forward by each attendee. Matilda, the novice, prepared cups of spiced wine infused with honey and rosemary, passing them to families who'd lost kin. Sister Agnes blessed each cup, murmuring prayers that sorrow be transformed into strength. In one corner, Sonia and Roland led a quiet singing of an old lament, its haunting melody woven with refrains of renewal. Candles flickered across stone walls, illuminating carved beams and stained glass windows depicting saints of compassion. Each guest lifted a token and whispered a name: beloved mothers, fathers, children lost to famine, war, or plague. The hall's hush was punctuated only by the gentle clink of goblets and the soft murmur of remembrance. As the final verse faded, a child placed a token into a communal bowl at the table's center. Many followed, each adding their tribute. In that moment, grief and gratitude mingled into a tapestry of collective memory, proof that even the darkest trials could yield a harvest of unity. In the abbey of St. Clair's nave, sunlight filtered through high lancet windows onto polished stone floors. Rows of children stood before the main altar, holding hymnals bound in rough leather. Their choir robes, simple wool dyed soft blue, rustled in the hush as Sister Beatrice gave the signal. The children's voices rose in unison. A new hymn penned by Brother Simeon, from shadowed vale to golden field. Through trial's fire our spirits healed. In unity our hearts reveal the grace that binds our common weal. Marta the weaver sat in the front pew, tears shining as she listened. Yardith and Gareth knelt beside Thomas and Sonia, hands folded in reverent appreciation. Each note echoed against the vaulted ceiling like a promise reborn. After the final verse, the abbey's ancient bells rang in response, a call to all who journeyed together through darkness. The children curtsied, eyes bright with pride, and the congregation rose in heartfelt applause. Candle lanterns flickered as the choir processed out, their hymn lingering in the air. In that sacred moment, the young voices embodied the living future, children who'd known only the world rebuilt, yet carried within them the echoes of recovery that would guide their steps for generations to come. At the crest of the hill overlooking Ridgeford, Sir Gareth raised his sword skyward at first light, the blade catching a single beam of sun. Below, villagers gathered, baskets in hand, children carrying freshly baked bread, millers with sacks of flour, weavers with bolts of linen. Lady Edith stepped forward holding a scroll, the charter renewed for another generation. She broke the wax seal and read the final oath aloud. We pledge to honor the bonds of compassion, toil, and memory for all who dwell here, now and ever after. Her voice carried over the quiet throng. A hush fell as Brother Simeon released a handful of late-sown barley seed, scattering it across the hill. May our future sprout as these seeds, he blessed, rooted in the lessons of an era that tested us and bound us together. The assembly dispersed across the slope, kneeling to plant their seeds. Each placed grain in the soil, young and old, noble and peasant alike. The hillsides transformed into a patchwork of furrows, each row a living pledge of hope. As the sun crested the horizon, the air filled with gentle breeze and the quiet promise of growth. In that final dawn, every heart beat in unison, an unspoken vow that the age of apocalypse had given way to an enduring legacy, one sown in shared sacrifice, compassion, and the ceaseless renewal of life itself. At the height of midday, Ridgeford's main thoroughfare thrummed with renewed vitality. Market stalls stretched in colourful rows, each shaded by linen awnings. Marta, the weaver, displayed bolts of bright flax linen. Sonia's bakery booth offered warm honey cakes. Thomas the miller sold fine white flour neatly bagged in stamped cloth. Buyers, farmers, artisans, and travelling merchants haggled amicably, their faces alight with the buoyant energy of a community that had endured and triumphed. Sir Gareth and Lady Edith strolled between the stalls, exchanging greetings and sampling goods. He accepted a slice of cheese from the dairymaid. She picked up a pot of lavender salve crafted by Sister Agnes to soothe sunburned hands. Nearby,
Brother Simeon blessed each stall with a sprinkle of holy water, while Sister Beatrice distributed small scrolls of market rules, copied from the new statutes, to ensure fair trade. In one corner, children clustered around a tinkering smith's apprentice, entranced by the ringing of his hammer on glowing iron. He fashioned intricate nails for roof repairs, a symbol of rebuilding. At the fountain's edge, Elder Margaret sat on a bench, weaving barley stalks into a ceremonial garland, her gnarled fingers steady with purpose. A travelling scholar from the southern universities arrived, presenting letters of recommendation penned by Master Elric, proof that Ridgeford's reputation for resilience and learning had spread far beyond its walls. Traders from distant towns carried spices, silks and salted fish, linking the village to networks of commerce once fractured by plague and war. As the sun reached its zenith, the chapel bell tolled, and the market paused for the Angelus. A hush fell. Villagers bowed heads in gratitude. Then, laughter and haggling resumed, richer now for the pause, a reminder that prosperity and piety could coexist. Under the clear sky, Ridgeford's market pulse beat strong, a living testament to hopes harvested and shared abundantly. On Ridgeford's east edge, a row of freshly framed timber houses took shape against the late afternoon sun. Giles the carpenter measured oak beams for door lintels, while Rowan the tanner coated post bases in pitch to guard against rot. Apprentices sawed planks. Women carried baskets of thatch reeds for the roofs. Lady Edith paused at one doorway, smoothing plaster along the wattle walls. She handed a small pot of lime mortar to Isolde the potter, who mixed it with straw and clay. "Steady now," Edith encouraged, her calm voice carrying over the bustle. Inside, Sister Beatrice organised bundles of rushes to cover earthen floors, ensuring each home would be warm and dry come winter. Sir Gareth directed a team of former militia, now trained builders, in raising a smokehouse beside the largest cottage. Sparks flew from the blacksmith's forge, as martyr-shaped iron hooks and hinges for sturdy doors. Each piece bore a stamped emblem of the village, a sheaf of barley, symbolising renewal built into every home. In the background, the river's gentle murmur marked time, as carpenters secured roof beams and thatchers wove reed mats overhead. Children played beneath scaffold planks, weaving flowers into the moss-covered logs, their laughing laughter echoing hope with every ring. By dusk, the skeletal frames had been clothed in walls and roofs. Torches lit inside each cottage cast a golden glow through small windows, as families moved in, some widows, some returning exiles, ready to reclaim their lives under sturdy roofs. In the growing darkness, Ridgeford's skyline was reborn, a cluster of humble homes rising from the ashes of calamity, each one a shelter for dreams yet to unfold. A small caravan assembled outside the rebuilt gate. Scholar Elric, his sleeves dusted with chalk, Sister Beatrice carrying scroll tubes, and 4 eager youths, Thomas's daughter, Marta's nephew, Sonia's apprentice and Roland's cousin, each granted letters of introduction to renowned universities. Their cloaks bore Ridgeford's crest, a sheaf of barley over a rising sun. Lady Edith and Sir Gareth stood beside Brother Simeon to bid them farewell. Edith pressed quills and parchment into each traveller's hand. "Let knowledge spread from our village into wider realms," she said. Gareth embraced the scholars, offering simple advice. "Stay true to our values, compassion and curiosity." As the first wheels creaked forward, Sister Beatrice recited a prayer for safe passage. The scholars bowed to the assembled crowd, farmers, artisans and clergy, whose faces glowed with pride and hope. The smallest, a shy baker's boy, stepped forward. Edith knelt, handing him a hand-woven satchel. "Carry a bit of Ridgeford with you." The procession wound along a forested road, pennants fluttering with each turn. Villagers lined the path, offering baskets of provisions, dried meat, hard bread, and jars of herbal tonic. Dr. Elowen handed each scholar a phial of distilled thyme extract for vigour and clarity on long journeys. When the gate closed behind them, the village stood silent but expectant. The departure marked a new chapter. Minds once bound by scarcity, now free to explore cathedrals of learning, carrying the seeds of renewal to distant lands and returning with the promise of discoveries yet unwritten. Inside the Abbey of St. Clair, Morning sunlight cascaded through stained-glass windows onto a marble mosaic reading Memoria et Spes, Memory and Hope. The nave brimmed with villagers gathering for a commemoration mass to honor those lost during the 14th century apocalypse and celebrate the endurance of survivors. Elder Margaret, her silver hair bound in a linen veil, carried a brass candelabra representing each year since recovery began. She placed 5 candles, one for each decade, alongside newly carved wooden crosses. Behind her, Sister Agnes arranged wreaths of rosemary and ivy on the altar steps. Brother Simeon intoned the opening hymn. Children formed a choir, their voices imbued with solemn wonder as they sang of trials overcome. Lady Edith and Sir Gareth knelt in the front row, holding hands. Their eyes glistened with tears of remembrance. Roland and Sonia followed, offering baskets of bread and wine for the offertory. Father Matthias delivered the homily, thoughtful. From famine's grip, war's ravage, and death's shadow has risen a community bound by compassion and courage. Let our memories guide us to ensure no such darkness befalls our kin again. His words resonated, weaving past sorrows into future resolve. After communion, villagers moved to the side aisles, lighting candles at each memorial cross. The chapel's gentle hush was punctuated only by the soft flicker of flames and whispered prayers. Brother Simeon gathered the faithful for a final blessing, his hand resting on the ancient reliquary of St. Clare. As the service concluded, the assembled departed in quiet procession, stepping into the bright morning, each soul carrying both memory's weight and hope's light forward into a legacy still unfolding. As dusk settled over Ridgeford, the hearth's embers glowed warmly in the great hall's stone fireplace. A circle of villagers, elder and youth alike, gathered on rush-strewn benches. At the centre stood an aged storyteller, beard streaked with grey, clasping a carved walking staff. He and began in a sonorous, "Tonight I have woven for you the tale of famine's spectre, war's fury, and plague's shadow. Yet see how our people rose, bound by hope and hands joined in compassion." His voice rose and fell like the river beyond the walls, evoking images of starving fields, echoing battle cries, and mournful funeral drums. Children's eyes widened, elders nodded knowingly. The storyteller paused, letting the crackle of flames fill the hush. "And now," he continued, "we stand in a season of plenty, our barns full, our hearts full. Let us carry this story forward, into each dawn and every generation, so that memory be our compass and hope our guide." Lady Edith sat beside Sir Gareth, her hand resting on his. Martha and Thomas exchanged smiles. The scholars who had returned from distant halls joined the circle, sharing brief learned phrases, then settling into rapt attention. When the final words faded, a hush lingered. Then the villagers rose, voices soft but united, happy to memory and hope. The hearth's flames danced brighter as mugs of cider were raised. Under the night sky's starry tapestry, Ridgeford's living story found its next chapter, one written by every hand, inspired by the tales of yesterday and the promise of all tomorrows. Slow the pacing, soften vocabulary, lengthen sentences, reassure the listener, fade the final imagery and close on a calming stress. When the fires of famine dimmed and the echoes of war fell silent, an even more invisible foe crept into the heart of every village, every town, and every soul. Let us pause a moment, letting the weight of those days settle gently around us. Imagine crouching by a simple wooden hearth, its last embers glowing softly as the night sky deepens into serene darkness. Feel the cool air on your skin, carrying faint scents of pine and damp earth, reminding you that even the hardest trials belong only to history, that moment now lives only in memory. Trust in the quiet persistence of countless hearts, beating in rhythm with hope and faith. Know that every hardship, every tear shed, and every prayer offered under trembling candles built the foundations for the world we inhabit today.
Let your eyelids grow heavy, each breath a gentle tide, carrying you toward peaceful shores. Think of those families who, after enduring the unimaginable, rose to greet a new dawn, tender and cautious, yet determined. Now, as you drift between waking dreams and restful sleep, carry with you the knowledge that you are never alone. History's lessons, whispered softly through the ages, guide and protect you still. May the hush of this moment wrap you in warmth, and may your spirit awaken refreshed, ready to face each new day with calm confidence. Good night, dear listener, until we meet again in another story's embrace.